The public, just as an advance notice, the public may attend this meeting in person.
Can you?
No, no, you don't.
I don't know. I can't see what you're supposed to do.
Other what.
Can we mute that?
We're good. He
Good,
muted
okay. Or you can join the meeting from your computer with the following login information of https://global.gotomeeting.com/join/3972-90741. Or you can also dial into the meeting or you're using your phone at 1-646-749-3122 with an access code of 397-290-741. If anybody'd like me to repeat those, I can do that later. So tonight, first item on the agenda that we have is a request for determination of applicability from Massimo Marino at 22 Uncle Vini's Road to reconstruct a shed, reseed a disturbed area, and plant shrubs.
Good evening, Lynn Hamlin representing the applicant. Should be fairly easy. Mr. Marino erroneously thought that he could just rebuild his existing 8x10 shed, and he was informed otherwise. Actually, what he decided as he got going was to build a little bigger shed, but he had troubles with zoning as well. So to facilitate the approval of a shed, so he could at least put his lawnmower back into it, he's going back to an 8x10 as was previously existing. And I just showed you some documentation to prove that. On the site plan for the septic upgrade, it shows the shed. There's corresponding Google Earth images that show the shed. It looks like somebody pivoted it a little bit on its base sometime around 2012, but it was there. And you can see that, well, the resource area is a coastal bank. It's extremely vegetated. He's got, trying to hold it back from coming onto his lawn. The construction is all contained within a tight little footprint. It was all within existing lawn, so nothing was cut down. So what he wants to do is just put his 8x10 shed back where it was. He'll cut back the platform and the stone to accommodate the correct size. And as a self-imposed punitive measure, he's proposing a cluster of 5 native shrubs. We wanted to be careful not to upset the neighbors and block a view, so we tucked it to the other side of the property. I have a photo of that, so it doesn't block anybody's view. I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Great, thank you, Lynn. Amy, do you have any comments?
Now that it's back in its original footprint, which it has historically had been in, I have no qualms about this. Mr. Marino was very good and worked a lot with Melissa, the assistant agent, to kind of come to this conclusion that an RDA would be sufficient to replace it in kind. And as they did start doing it a little bit in advance of getting permits, I think a couple of shrubs on the small property is appropriate in lieu of any fines or anything like that. And it is all an existing lawn area. So with that, I would recommend approval with a -3 determination, with the conditions of the no chemical application. You can condition an RDA. It's doesn't get recorded, but there's paper trail. Return the area, the other disturbed area, that slightly larger area, back to just native Cape Cod lawn. And, yep, and the shrubs to be planted. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Comments from the commissioners? Mark, do you have any?
No remarks.
Dan?
No, I'm all set.
John?
Other comments or questions?
Wonderful. Brad?
Nothing on the shed, just, yeah, very green back there. And I imagine it probably had conditions in the past, maybe recent conditions, no?
No,
Because it's
we
not that-
haven't been to the property in a while, this one.
Okay. Well, I think, yeah, that's something that we'd love to see, a reduction of chemical applications at that location. That's all.
Jim?
No comment.
Alan, anything then?
No comment.
Okay, great. So with that, can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the RDA for 22 Uncle Vinnie's Road to reconstruct the shed with a -3 determination and the conditions that Amy mentioned, and no chemical application, reseeding of the disturbed lawn area with a native seed mix, and monitoring of the proposed shrub plantings for a 3-year period.
Second.
Second? Mark, thanks. All in favor? Aye. Good. Pass unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before moving on, I just want to also introduce our new commissioner. Alan Hall has joined us tonight, his first meeting, and we welcome you. Thank you for jumping in the lines down here.
Look forward to helping out the town of Harwich and its residents.
Terrific, great, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda. We have a request to amend an order of conditions for 11 Harbor Way. Have a comment here, what speak to this? Fran? Oh, okay.
Fran, you are welcome to sit up here if you wish. You don't have to.
Want me to come up there?
If you feel like you're going to speak, sure.
I'll listen to Dawn if you want to chime in if you need.
All right, sounds good. You can also use the podium. You don't have to sit front and center.
Dawn, you're on.
Yes, through the chair, it's Don Monroe from Coastal Engineering, representing the applicant, Fran Zaretti. The plan that we sent to you is a plan that was prepared based on an on-site meeting with Lindsay Strode and the conservation agent and the owner. The area has pretty well stabilized under the fish house after the work has been done. So part of the proposal is to eliminate the bulkhead, which was going to be installed to hold salt marsh in place. But Lindsay Strode would speak to the fact that the salt marsh replication in the Herring River area because of ice flow may not take well, even with the bulkhead. So rather than go through that exercise and damage more resource area, land under ocean and land containing shellfish, we took it upon ourselves with Lindsay's advice and with Amy there at the site to discuss the moving of the salt marsh more landward, since we do know this area does flood regularly. So we came up with this plan where we show salt marsh to the south and also additional planting to make up for any salt marsh that we wouldn't be planting to the north, but planting in the areas to reduce the size of the parking area so that we get more vegetation growing in those areas to limit the amount of parking that might take place in the gravelled area. So that's kind of it in the short version. So I'd like to entertain any, well, actually, maybe let Lindsay speak to, if Lindsay's there with Fran, to the planting schedule that he prepared for this particular amended application.
Good evening, Lindsay Strode for the record, Cape Organics for Mr. Zaretti. Yeah, just following up on what Don had said, the initial plan showed a lot of replication seaward. And just with my experience in the areas that are constantly, in that intertidal zone, and particularly more so in the winter, you'll get a high tide, ice flows will sit on it, it'll freeze. When the tide comes back up, it has tendency to pull things with it. So running back and up and down the river isn't really my idea of a fun February trying to rescue things. So what we would do is pull it back. We expanded the planting area along the southwest and western side. And we also added some area along the northeast as you're looking at the Saltworks house just to the left there. So we've added a significant amount of area there as well. All plantings are going to be indigenous to the area. One of the things we will do, and sometimes it gets a little confusing, some people will call out salt marsh grass, and the area that is to the immediate south, it's actually salt marsh wheatgrass. In my garden, it's a pernicious pest, but in this location, it does really well. nobody really grows that, and we've had significant success plugging that judiciously out of the area and into areas that would accept it. So that would be one of the areas that we would be working with. All of those boulders, some of those would be relocated, and that would add more planting area. Those boulders would be relocated to the southwest and west area, just again to delineate and define active travel areas so people aren't driving up into the planting areas that we're proposing. So, in a nutshell, that's what I've got for you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could you go to the mics?
Picture of the building. This was a picture of the fish house that was made to cover the magazine last year in Harwich. And you can see at high tide, I can pass it around to the board, where the water comes right up under the dock where the original bulkhead was proposed.
Yeah, when we went there today, I know the tide seemed to be all the way up too, and it was all the way right past the cement blocks that are there. That's about as high as it gets, I assume, right?
No.
Oh, Lord.
It wasn't a king tide.
I guess not.
It covers a lot of the lot.
Looks like it's floating. Oh, thank you, that was helpful. Yeah. Amy, do you have any comments?
Sure. So part of what was the original filing was for an overwash bulkhead kind of underneath the building, and then trying to restore some marsh landward of that bulkhead. The overwash bulkhead, and Don, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not needed for stability at all of the building. And then trying to grow salt marsh underneath that large deck, underneath part of the building, or in the shadow of that building, the stairs, contributing with all the piles and the upwellers and the flow. In addition to the potential ice that would happen in the wintertime, it seemed that the replanting effort would be best used farther landward than under there. So what they are proposing is that all the planting is now in high water and above. As you can see on the plan, there's a section close to the deck building and the loading dock that would all be replicated, and would be marsh replication, upper marsh replication, and then along the sides and west of the property, as Don had stated, or Lindsay had stated, I apologize, a couple of the stones would be relocated to prevent people from parking on the new plantings, and the new plantings would take up area that is currently gravel driveway. One thing I do want to mention while we're talking about the plantings and location is it did come to our attention that in front of driveways there's proposed to be some rocks and planting, and what we would like to have you do in this is to not put rocks and plantings in front of that driveway. To reallocate that a couple of square feet that it has in conjunction with the other plantings, but not to, obviously, not really a conservation issue, but not to block access for anybody trying to get to their property.
Through the chair, I haven't talked to Fran, but I'm sure Fran would be amenable to just relocating that small bit of area so that we aren't blocking access. And also, yes, the bulkhead is not necessary for the stability of the fish house. That stability of the fish house has been signed off by a structural engineer. So it's in good shape. So yes, the main purpose of the bulkhead was to try to establish a holding mechanism for the salt marsh root, actually the marsh mats that were going to go along with it. But Lindsay's made a good point that even with the overwash bulkhead, ice flow can get up and over that, especially with what Stan said about king tides. You can get some pretty good tides in there in the winter, and the ice could, do some damage. So I think it would be better served to put the plantings more landward. It is above mean high water that we're proposing the planting, but I believe Lindsay can speak to the fact that since it is going to flood, there will be salt-tolerant plants, and it is a salt marsh kind of replication because of the extent of the higher than high tides in this location.
Yeah, the king tides can pretty much cover this whole property. One other request that we did have, again, not so much a conservation issue, more so a neighborhood thing, is to leave a gap in the split rail fence on the south side of the property where people traditionally walk out to get to the jetty. Just a gap large enough to let people continue to walk down that path. Again, not a conservation issue, more of a neighborhood and civil issue. Fran's, you know, you've always been cooperative with people on the property, so hopefully that can continue. This proposal eliminates an intertidal structure by not having to do an overwash bulkhead. I think overall it is a good plan. I think the more plantings landward accomplish several things. One, more vegetative buffer, less area potentially for people, an excess of people to come down and park, but still enough for Mr. Zarette and his and ARC to be able to use. Hopefully still access for emergency vehicles, because I know that they were interested in that back at the time of the permitting. And overall, I see this as a benefit, and I recommend approval of the amendment.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, Mark?
I have no remarks.
Stan?
Yeah. Hey, Don, I've got a couple of questions because I guess my understanding of what we were looking at today is a little bit different than what I see on the drawing. For example, right now there's 3 existing, those cement pads or blocks, and I only see one here on the drawing to the north, I guess. So are the other 2 being removed, or are they being left? Because it's kind of changing my understanding of what we're planting there on the south side of the fish house.
Yeah, that's a great question, Stan. It looks like that layer may have been turned off on the drawing. So that concrete blocking that's to the south, that was discussed, and because of the extent of that concrete, it was better, we felt better to leave it, and so it is going to be left in, only because of the amount of disturbance that would take place to remove it. Didn't seem to gain a benefit. It actually is holding material and soil from going into the riverway, so we felt it would be better to leave it. We can amend the drawing to show that.
No, I have
I
no
think it's,
problem, Don. I have no problem with that because that was my understanding. Those were going to be left there, and I agree with you that that would help preserve any erosion and anything. So it's really a relatively small area, I guess, to the south that's being planted with grass from those blocks over, right?
yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other part of it, I guess, is I thought we were, and I'm not saying it should be, but it looks like where the planting goes, it's that western area up where the sand is more, and not along the driveway on the south side, up until you get that corner, and then planting on the north side of the driveway is where it's really occurring, right?
Yes, and Lindsay's right there, so he could chime in, but yes, the plan does show what you just described, Stan.
No, and that's good, because I was concerned with Amy's comment about emergency vehicles, that if we were putting both sides, if we were planting on both sides, that would really be narrowing that driveway a lot more than what's there. And again, I don't know what the concerns are with the fire department and everything of being able to turn around and whatever, but that was my other question.
Mr. Chairman, through the chair, I addressed the question. They are putting plantings on the east side, on the south side, and on the west side, but they're only going to be like 4 or 5 feet of width that's going to be encroaching on the existing driveway. Predominantly, most of it's going to be in front of the fish house. And to address the concrete pads, those are structurally, they're part integral of the piles that we put in to hold the building in place, but we did have concrete pads that were on the south side of the building initially when I bought the property, and we removed all those and took them out of the water, along with all the fish poles and the weir poles that were there on the property.
Right. Yeah, no, I have no issues with anything that you're doing. I just wanted to confirm it, that's all. Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
John?
No questions, no comments, thank you.
Oh, I have one question. On the original plan from 2016, you had a lot of beach plums and Carolina rose and all, but it looks, on the new plan, it will strictly be just the American beach grass? Is that right?
I think I should let Lindsay, can you speak to that? Because I think you were concerned about the plants that were proposed in the first proposal and opted for these because of the flooding that takes place there, but I could be wrong, so.
There
Like,
is American beach grass, but it's going to be put higher up. Beach grass grows well on the beach, but it doesn't like saltwater inundation, ironically. So we're going to keep that higher, and that elatrigia, or that salt marsh wheatgrass, is going to be the replacement for that. We do have a variety of plant material. We did take away some, but we added others. High tide bush, groundsel bush, instead of some of the other plant material that was not as salt tolerant or tolerant of inundation. So it was really kind of horse trading with a few different plant materials. The area, I believe, is the same or more than what was originally proposed. So it's all going to be vegetated and done well so.
And the plantings are going to be in essentially the same location as was on the 2016 plan? Because they're not, I don't believe, are they shown on this new plan at all? I don't see them.
The area is,
The area, yeah, the proposed replanting area.
Yeah, Ernie, yeah, the areas are shown there. Do you want me to share my screen and point it out? We can do that. Let's see if this works. Can you see this plan on your screen?
yes.
Yes.
All right, so my cursor is pointing to the area that's hatched. It's now the new planting, one new planting area. Then in this location as well, and it's expanding the area where the fish bowls were, they were right in here. So we're proposing a lot of planting in this location and moving some of the boulders into this location so that this area of already vegetated area will be protected. Then this is also an area that's proposed to be planted with that salt tolerant type grass that Lindsay was mentioning. So I don't have the 2016 plan in front of me, but Lindsay's correct. The plantings that we are showing here are more plantings than what was proposed in 2016.
Okay, all right. So you're showing the area, but you're just not showing the actual plants that'll be going in there.
Correct. There's a table up above, and that table lists the plants that are going to go in those areas. Then there's some notes on the plan, like 31 coastal plants, 1,000 plugs of various grasses. That's one note. And then down here, proposed replanting area, 600 square feet of this material, of these plants that are listed up in this, these two tables.
All right.
And the spacing's indicated there too, 12 to 18, 12 inch to 18 inch spacing.
Yeah.
So they're becoming pretty tight.
Okay, fine, thank you. Oh, I see that, yeah. Brad?
No comments, very good changes.
Jim?
No, I have no comments.
Alan, any comments?
I think it looks great, having gone there 35 years ago, delivering ice for Brewster Ice Company, and Mr. Lucas. I think it looks really good down there.
Great. Let me ask, are there any other comments from the audience?
And just to remind people, if you are on your phone, if you have to hit *6 to be heard, but, so this would be the time for public comment. Just announce yourself.
All right.
Hearing none.
Hearing none. Good. Could we have a motion, please?
We approve the
I
amendment.
guess, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, Stan. I move we approve the amended The request for amendment to the order of condition for 11 Harbor Way.
Second it.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I thought, I guess it was muted. My name is Kathy White. I'm a neighbor in the immediate area of the fish house. And I just had one quick question. That the plan looks good. Is just confirmation that there will be pedestrian access, that little pathway to the jetty that runs along the Herring River out to, the end of the Belmont property.
Yeah, I think as Amy mentioned earlier, that's really not an issue that we can address from a conservation perspective. I don't know, Fran, if you want to comment to that or not, it's your call.
The owner is going to speak to that, Kathy.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone's using my property right now. They park there, they go to the beach there. I don't care if they use it or not. They're welcome to go through there, as long as there's no destruction there.
So it sounds like you're
Okay,
looking for
all right.
a gap in the fence. Thanks, Fran.
Okay, thank you.
Here, thank you for calling in. Any other comments? Oh, we have a motion on the table that's been seconded, so all in favor?
No, we didn't have a second.
I did.
Oh, Stan, I'm sorry.
All opposed? All righty, thank you.
Thank you very much through the chair. Have a good night.
Thank you, Don.
I have my magazine back.
Oh, yeah.
It cost me a lot of money for
It's
that.
not for us. I was holding it for safekeeping.
I keep safe. Okay. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for Michael and Sheila Leblanc at 28 Wahwatese Road, proposed elevated walkway and landing.
Good evening. Let's wait for Mark.
Where I can put this that everybody can see, including the camera perhaps, but we'll start here and see what happens. Do you have the other?
I don't have another one here. Sorry. These chairs work fairly decently.
Yes.
We're high tech.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you guys mastered the hybrid approach. And welcome, Mr. Hall, by the way, and welcome, Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you.
So that is the latest plan, and what do you know? Okay, now that I've taken up the entire room. So for the record, first of all, is it okay if I take this off while I'm talking?
Yeah, it's your call, Mark, that's fine.
You're not
Thank you.
required.
I am fully vaccinated. Thank you. Members of the board, for the record, my name is Mark Burgess with Shorefront Consulting, and we've been representing Michael and Sheila LeBlanc, who are in the audience, since December of 2020. So, for the benefit of the new members on the board, I know you're not eligible to vote on this, but for your benefit and for other benefit of the members, I have a short summary that takes us from the beginning to get us to why we're at hearing number 5 for an elevated walkway project. So we started on December 2nd of 2020, hearing number 1, and for that hearing, that's the initial substance of the project. Division Marine Fisheries commented about their standard shading impact statement regarding the height of the walkway, because at that point, the walkway was, per the current bylaws, I believe it was 4 feet to the deck, 1-to-1 height to the deck, and that is per even the current Harwich bylaws. But Division Marine Fisheries always comments that they would like the walkways or any structures higher to a 1.5-to-1 ratio. So there were some other comments. The hearing was continued to revise the plan. So revision number 1 was issued on December 15th to shorten the walkway and elevate it higher. And this was the result of an on-site meeting on December 9th, which was a collaboration between myself, the registered professional engineer from Moran Engineering, Dan Croto, and Amy. And some of the marsh was redelineated at that point as well. So the walkway was shortened from 101 to 73 feet, and it was raised up to provide 5 feet to the underlying stringer at mean high water. And a shading study was submitted. Now, this was a study that I had done for other projects. The basic premise of the study was that several projects in Dennis and Yarmouth and all around were photographed to show the damage to a marsh that results from walking through it. And then if a properly designed structure was properly designed and permitted and built, that the marsh literally restored itself 100% within a year. So that was the intent of that report. A sketch of different deck spacings was also provided because there was a question of what are the areas, the shading areas, if the deck spacing is a 1/2 inch or 3/4 or an inch. So we provided that to the commission at that time. So we had hearing number 2 on January 20th of 21. That information was discussed. The revision was discussed. There's still what didn't seem to be satisfied with shading impacts or the impacts on the loss of marsh from what was then 3 piles in the marsh. A motion was actually made in the affirmative to deny the project, and that motion carried. Subsequently, the motion was withdrawn, and we were allowed a continuance to address the concerns that came up during hearing number 2. After that, the plan was revised again to reduce the width to 3.5 feet from 4, shortened further to a length of 66 feet, redesigned so that there were only 2 piles in the marsh, and elevated so that there is 6.4 feet of clearance to the decking at mean high water and a minimum of 5.25 feet to the decking over the entire marsh. All of those requirements, I'd like to point out, exceed your current bylaws. Also, 100 square feet of new marsh plantings was also offered as any potential mitigation to cover the less than 2 square feet of the pilings that were in the actual marsh. Minor changes to the path were also added. March 17th of 21 was hearing number 3. Pile scouring and shading impacts were discussed. Bylaw definitions, water-dependent structures, etc. were also discussed. Amy, at that point, recommended approval based on the plan revisions, and the project was continued to request third-party review. June of 2021, Greg Berman, we met on site, and then Greg Berman, he submitted his findings on June 7th, basically stating that, and now I'll quote, "If the proposed height to width ratio adequately protects the marsh, then the 2 monopiles with less than 2 square feet of impact will likely have less impact than foot traffic and kayak landing," unquote. He also stated, quote, "The monopile footprints could likely be considered so relatively small as to be negligible, parentheses, AKA de minimis." This is in his report that he submitted. For those of you who may not know Greg, he's a well-respected coastal geologist that works for the County Extension Service, and they provide a third-party review, an independent review, when commissions and applicants may not entirely agree. If the idea is to get another independent party who is completely independent and objective to review, and they do it at no cost to the applicant. So June 8th, a project summary was provided by myself, Shorefront Consulting, and attorney Brian Wall, who is next to me, for design and regulatory summaries respectively. So I gave a summary about the design aspects, and Brian submitted a summary of how the project met the bylaws and all of that. June 16th of 21 was hearing number 4. Amy also recommended approval again for that hearing. The submissions were reviewed and discussed. The chairman at the time did not feel that the issue of pile scour and shading effects were addressed adequately in our summary of June 8th, and the project was continued for 2 months until August 18th. So here we are in August 18th, and hearing number 5, For hearing number 5, over a week ago, I submitted a separate pile shading and scouring report. And what I did was I started with an example that was given by the chair at the time on a dock that's situated just north of this site. And I'll point out just for, that is this dock, or now it's a walkway maybe, the series of pictures to the left. The claim was that this dock was shading and pile scouring, had shading and pile scouring impacts to the marsh. So I went and took a look at it. I think the pictures speak for themselves, but there's very little difference on either side, under the walkway or on either side. And I need to point out that this walkway is only 29 inches to the underlying structural member. It clearly would not be approved today, which is why these designs have evolved over time to reduce the potential for these impacts. To me, scour means erosion. So in that picture, I don't see any pockets of erosion around these pilings. So then I said, well, let me move on. So I went to the 2 new docks that were recently approved on the Herring River. Now these are the latest designs that have been approved. They're high, they have round monopiles, not square. They are above and beyond the regulations. So to me, that is the new standard. And this project is designed exactly after that new standard. So in looking at those pilings, there also is zero erosion or any kind of sediment movement, not even a dent around the piling, not even a dent. And I actually expected maybe a dent, but I couldn't find anything. I found what I feel the pictures prove is that there is zero disturbance to the soil, at least from the piling. So with my definition of scouring being some kind of erosion, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I did not see it on any of those docks or the 5 other ones, 7 total that I went to in Harwich. I simply didn't see it anywhere. The other one on the left, well, this is 10 Chase Street. In the first picture, you can also see there was a path on the left-hand side of that pile from construction efforts. And after only 1 season, the marsh is basically back 100%, which is amazing. You know, we were challenged of whether that was going to happen, but Mother Nature did it all on its own. And looking at where am I at here? I'm sorry. This is 18 Strandway. I was wrong. This one is 10 Chase Street. You can see just a little remnant right here, but this is where that path was. And those are the first pictures that I submitted on the cover page of the report, where during construction, there was like a 3 or 4 foot wide clear swath. So just 1 year later, it was finished in September of last year. So not even 1 year later, the marsh is basically as healthy as it was when we started. That's a great thing. Again, no scour around the pile. And then the bottom picture on the left is a blow-up of an old dock, 30, 40 years, with the traditional stub piles. Now, those piles are permanent. They stay in also. But again, I don't see any soil disturbance around those piles. So in short, the marshes on the new projects, the new standard, are fully restored after construction. I know separately from this meeting, we've gone through additional shellfish surveys, and we've agreed that the shellfish populations are still healthy, so hasn't been any impact from these new designs to the shellfish population. Again, separately, the second round of shellfish studies have been done. I just don't have the data yet. So it would suggest that these new designs are in fact doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and that is provide the proper access, but not negatively affect the resource areas. I'm going to submit at all, not even a little bit, never mind significant. So please remember, Division of Marine Fisheries comments that we had from the very beginning the only comment they had was the height, and we addressed that by raising the walkway. We've revised the plan twice to increase its height, reduce its width, decrease its length. We've had an independent professional review the project and provide his comments. And then I provided a follow-up study, a follow-up report to try to address the issue of pile scouring and shading real time as of literally a week ago. So with that, obviously, we feel that we've addressed all of the concerns that the commission has brought forward to date. It's been an exhaustive review and process. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Brian.
Thank you. Through the chair, for the record, my name is Brian Wall. I'm an attorney, and together with Mark, I represent the applicants who are, again, here in the audience. I only have a couple of brief comments since Mark so comprehensively reviewed everything. The first is an obvious one. Mark and I have great clients. They listen to the commission, they listen to us, and when we asked them to make changes to the project, they did. And Mark has categorically gone through all of them. The length has been reduced, the height has been increased, the piles have been reduced. If I was listening, but you might have missed one, there's 100 square feet of marsh restoration also proposed at the ledge of the, did I say that right, the ledge?
Yeah, out on the peat edge.
Out on the peat edge.
Yep.
So the point I'm trying to make is that the applicants have listened carefully to the commission's concerns, and we believe that we've addressed all the concerns. The second point I want to make is during the various hearings that Mark referred to, there have been many comments and concerns expressed about impacts, and they've been expressed in different words like scouring or shading, etc. I know the commission knows this, and so I'm just going to say it respectfully. I'm just kind of reminding you that all projects have impacts, that your regulations have a section on elevated walkways, docks, that your regulations therefore contemplate allowing piers, ramps, and floats. This has no float or ramp, it's the walkway only. And also in the preamble to your regulations and also in your bylaw, what you're regulating are not impacts per se, but I'm going to quote, significant adverse impacts on protected environmental interests. And we would respectfully submit that this project will have an impact. There's going to be a walkway, if you approve this, where there's none now. However, we believe that there are not significant adverse impacts on the interests that you protect under your bylaw and your regulations. And the final point I want to make is about the quality, quantity of the evidence. There have been 2 expert opinions provided to you that this project does not have significant adverse effects. One expert is to my left, Mark. He's an expert in this area, and his opinion carries weight. There's also the independent review that we had by Greg Berman of the Extension Service. Mark did not mention this. He quoted some of the part of the project, but at the end, you did quote it about the de minimis, that there was no adverse effect and that the effect of the pilings will be negligible and or de minimis. DMF, as Mark mentioned, has reviewed it. I've seen many DMF letters. They often have many comments. There was one comment about the height, and they wanted to see the height go up higher than your regulations require, and the applicant agreed to do that. So the one comment from DMF has been addressed. And finally, I don't want to put words in Amy's mouth, but she has indicated that this is an approvable project. So what you have before you are essentially the opinions of 4 experts: Mark, Mr. Berman, DMF, and your own agent. And there is case law that says, and I'm going to quote, there's a case from Norfolk, and it's an appeals court case, and it says that the commission, when presented with what's called uncontradicted expert evidence, because there's no abutter here that's hired a different expert that's saying something different. You have all the consistent opinions that are being provided to you. And what the court said in Pollard was that when the commission is presented with uncontradicted expert evidence, if the commission chooses to disbelieve that evidence, and I'm going to quote, that evidence of a party having the burden of proof may not be disbelieved without an explicit and objectively adequate reason. And I go on to say, there must be a basis in the record for the rejection of uncontradicted expert opinion evidence for remaining unpersuaded. And so I would respectfully submit that based upon this record, this is an approvable project. We've addressed all of your concerns, and we would urge you to approve it. I think the Leblancs would like to say something very brief to the board, so if the chair permits.
Please.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Evening. For the record, Michael LeBlanc. I am the owner of 28 Wahwatese. Thank you for allowing me to speak very briefly. Just wanted to say that all we're trying to do here is to access the water safely for ourselves as we get older. And quite honestly, we think it's the best thing for the marshland itself. I think we've been very respectful since we've owned the property. We actually leave our property, go around to Fiddler's Lane, and our neighbor, who's been very kind, we actually use his access to the water. He's now retired, is at the property a lot more than he has been, so I feel like I'm starting to cringe upon that, plus I'm getting a little older. We think that we've addressed all your concerns, and to date, we spent over $20,000 trying to address your concerns, so we just want access to the water in a safe and a good manner. So that's kind of it. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Amy, you have a comment?
Sure. I'll try to be brief. My recommendation has not changed. I am recommending approval under the Wetlands Protection Act and under the bylaw for this project. I do think that they've gone through the steps and minimized the project to the extent feasible, taking into account the Commission's requests as well as DMF. In many ways, the project not only meets but does exceed your standards in that. So for instance, the spacing that they're proposing is either grading or 3/4 inch spacing in the decking. We require 1/2 inch. We require a 1-to-1 height to width ratio. DMF asked to 1.5 to 1, which provides better light penetration, and they've done that. The dock itself, or not dock, walkway, is 3.5 feet in width from the outer parts, I believe, from the stringers, and that where we allow 4. And my recommendation is not saying that there's not going to be no adverse impacts or no impacts, let's say that. It's that, as the applicant did say, I was going to say it, but you beat me to it, I don't see any significant impacts. I'm not saying that there's not going to be temporary, which, by the way, the Wetlands Protection Act allows a 1-year temporary impact to be able to bring an area that is disturbed back to normal for salt marsh. I'm not saying that there's not going to be impacts, but in my professional opinion, I'm saying I don't believe there'll be significant adverse impacts, and especially with the marsh addition that you're proposing, the 100 or so square feet, I believe.
100, yes.
That would restore an area likely greater than what would be disturbed. So for those reasons, I recommend approval to the board.
Thank you. Comments from commissioners? Can we start with you, Brad?
I'm sure. Any chance of bringing up my PowerPoint on the screen?
I'm not on my computer. I'd have to, Caleb doesn't have Dropbox, and I could run to my office, make it accessible to Caleb.
If you don't mind, I think the photographs I think are pretty useful, but I'll start off just explaining why I have not supported this project. There's been 2 votes. Vote to not approve, so it wasn't a denial. I guess we rescinded the denial, but twice this commission had a majority of voters decide not to approve it. And I think the reason is it requires a variance to 2 of our bylaw provisions. One for new structures in shellfish. The landing is in fact a new structure in shellfish habitat. The shellfish survey found a large percentage of shellfish. I think there's a 35% frequency of occurrence. And there was a number of cells that couldn't be sampled, so the real effective frequency of occurrence was 57%. So a lot of shellfish requires a variance. I have rarely supported a variance to that provision of our bylaws. I don't think it's a good idea. We have a lot of structures in our tide lands that are impacting these resources, and cumulatively we have a lot of impacts in our embayments. The second variance would be needed for impacts due to salt marsh, and we've heard a lot of discussion on that. I definitely want to dig into the most recent letter from Shoreline Consulting that discussed scouring impacts. But to me, a permanent structure means permanent impacts. A footpath is, if you look at them, they're really quite small in their footprint. and people come and go. And when people move on or whatever else, the salt marsh grows back in. So to me, a permanent structure has much more lasting permanent impact. And I felt that from the beginning here. So my concern with the latest letter from Shoreline Consulting is, to me, and I do want to contradict this letter, so let the record show that I am contradicting this letter. I think there's a fair amount of cherry picking of sites. I think in some cases what's actually happening is not represented accurately. And if we look at the third paragraph, it talks about 10 Fiddler's Landing having a healthy marsh on the entire length. If you go there, if we can look at...
May I make a, so I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr.
Sure.
Chase, but I just want to place an objection on the record and make something very clear.
Sure.
The applicant and even interested parties are required to submit information to the commission in advance, so that all parties have a fair and equitable chance to review that information.
Right.
And this is the 5th hearing, and in fact, the continuance from the last hearing was a full 2 months.
Yeah.
And we were provided this document today. And
Right.
I find that to be objectionable. I find it to be unfair. I find it to be violative of your process to come up with new information the day of the hearing.
I think that's a fair objection. Amy, what day did members receive this letter from August 10th?
Whatever day it was sent to me, so August 10th or 11th.
It was in my mailbox, I believe, last Friday.
It was in your Dropbox sooner.
Yeah, I don't have access right now to Dropbox.
I didn't know that.
It's saying it doesn't exist. So how many days sooner? A couple days? You know, it hasn't been that long. I think it's a fair objection, but I object to this letter. I think it misrepresents the actual conditions that he's discussing.
And we're listening to that, so I wanted to place that on the record.
I think that's fair.
And let's talk about your concerns.
Sure. We're all volunteers here, and we respond as quick as we can, and I wish I could have responded quicker. But, Mark, do you mind moving that easel out of the way so I can do a couple things?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry for belaboring the point, but do I understand the letter's actually 11 days old or 9 days old?
It's dated August 10th.
And it's a
My
document
letter
that...
is dated August 10th.
Yes.
No, but what about this?
Oh, this went out.
This isn't part of the record.
I'm sorry, I just want to know when it came into the commission's...
I sent it out this morning by email.
Okay,
So-
that's what I wanted to make clear. That
So
this is,
I think it's fair for you to object to it, but I'll tell you, there's some information here that I think the commissioners should hear about.
I don't think you're allowed to discuss it. It's not part of the official record.
All right, then, okay.
It wasn't submitted in time, Brad.
Here's what I'll do then instead. I'll go down bullet by bullet and identify all the things that I feel are inaccurate statements.
That's fine.
All right. All right, so third paragraph, you state there's a healthy marsh on the entire length of the structure at 10 Fiddler's Landing. And this is not accurate. This is incorrect. There's a large scour path that goes beneath the piling, and I wish I could show the photographs.
Those are them right there. I took those a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
You did, and again, your angle, what you're doing is taking pictures at the height of the growing season.
Yeah.
And so you're missing the scouring that occurs. I've got photographs that show a very large scour path that's directly associated with those pilings.
If that's an off-season photograph, that's not fair to assess the whole walkway. This is the way the marsh looks like at the height of its growing season. It looks great.
But you're saying there's no scouring impacts.
Scouring to me is erosion. I don't see any erosion, Brad.
And Google Earth shows erosion.
How do you get erosion from 1,000 feet up? I'm
should-
right there. Do you see any change in the sediments? Any pockets or bowls or any kind of erosion there? I don't see that.
If you were to come back and take that photograph from 30 feet out, you would see a very large scour path that cuts right through that section there. You can see it in Google Earth. You can see it when you go there in the off-season. I feel like you're taking photographs that are showing an advantageous angle at this height of the growing season.
It was not. It was tended to be factual and not misleading at all.
Well, I disagree with that.
Now, I will say this. Are there potentially older docks in Harwich that have some pile scouring? Perhaps. Those aren't my projects. I don't have permission to go on those sites, and I didn't feel it was right for me to trespass. So the other projects I went on are projects that I've been there, that I have permission to go. So that's why I didn't go to some of the others. But then again, you can't compare a 30-year-old dock and the way it was designed to the new designs now. the most pertinent pictures, apples to apples, are 10 Chase Street and 18 Strandway. That's the design we're proposing, and those are the impacts you should be looking at. Any other impacts from an older dock are irrelevant. They don't match.
It all depends on location. So Strandway is a very wide section of the Herring River below the Lowell County Bridge. And so your flow is much reduced compared to other locations. And so with one season, I would say you can't conclude very much there. It is promising at Strandway. At 10 Chase Street, you have a statement that I believe says that the marsh is fully restored. And that is not the case there. The construction impacts still have, they're not even close to being fully restored at that location. So that's another case where I think that, your photograph.
That's the path. That's what's left of the path. If you look on the front page, that dock was completed in September of last year, not even a year ago. And already that path is almost fully restored. Now, I have another picture from the other side.
Yeah.
But you can't see that little bit of path left over. So that would have been misleading if I used that picture. But I'm being honest and straightforward. And I took a shot straight down what's left of what was a 4-foot wide cleared path. That to me is amazing that is restored that well in less than a year. And by next season, probably be gone.
And so there's a stretch of salt marsh right under the pilings, going right to the water, that is not fully restored presently. And so, you can say it's fully restored, it's not.
Where?
It's.
Please point out where you're talking about.
See the bare spot? Right there where the piling is.
There's nothing there. This is above the high tide. That's the high tide mark. This, according to the drawing and the survey, this is the back edge of the existing marsh. There's always, almost always, a spit of sand between the marsh and then you get beach grass up above, because that's where the higher tides impact that vegetation.
Well, I wish I could show the photograph I have.
This is high tide vegetation here.
I wish I could show the photograph that I have. I don't know why I can't, Amy. I don't know, why, we can't introduce information like this.
So it's the commission's policy to not have new information the day of a hearing. The commission does require usually information a week prior, which they provided. I mean, in the proper procedure, if you wanted them to have proper time to review it and to show it, would be unfortunately a continuance for the next meeting.
Yeah.
But the commission, at times for small things, has been lenient and allowed stuff the day of, and I'm not trying to say anything for or against anybody.
I know,
here.
I understand. Well, the objection is, I understand it, it's just hard. We're a volunteer board. I received this material on Friday, and I responded as quick as I could, and, with everything else that's going on. So I think, to me, the Google Earth images are very clear. There's scouring paths associated with the pilings at 10 Fiddler's Landing, and the photographs I have show that. I don't know why you wouldn't have those scouring impacts with this proposal, and that's why I have not supported it. It's one of the impacts that's there. Any dock you go to between Route 28 and Lowell County Road and the Herring River has scouring impacts, every single one of them. And so, sure, some of those are older, but it's a real significant concern of these structures.
Chase would be in that area, right?
Yeah.
Chase Street one.
Yeah.
10 Chase Street is in the full current of the river.
Water body.
A paragraph later on says, in every case, no evidence of pile scar could be found, not even a slight depression around the circumference of the piles, either in the marsh, the coastal beach. If scouring is a potential impact from the piles, then scouring should have been evident on the Herring River. So, yeah, this is a small sample size, but we received this information, and we think that scouring is not an impact. That's how you would interpret that sentence. And to me, that's not even close to being accurate. Every single dock between Route 28 and Lowell County Road has scouring impacts. So this is not an insignificant concern that we have. It requires a variance, and so that's why I have not supported this project. We're not making this up. And cumulative impacts, we haven't talked about much, but cumulative impacts are obviously a concern here, and it's part of our purview to consider cumulative impacts. I wish this commission was invited to the Bruce Berman site visit. We were not. We should have been. He's a coastal geologist. He is not a salt marsh expert. He's a great guy. I've learned a lot from him, but it would have been great to have been there to have questions to ask him. So either way, my concerns are still there. I think you've done a great job minimizing impacts, and I can understand the applicant's interest here. I just think that it's a site that it really, the impacts from foot traffic over time will be less than the impacts from a permanent structure, in my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may say a couple of quick comments with all due respect. So the arrangements with Mr. Berman were made to collaboratively, correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, you were present, right?
I was present.
Yeah, so it's not like we snuck out there in the middle of the night with an expert. We made it known, we worked through the commission. In fact, we got the commission's permission to have this done. The second thing I'd like to say is I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist. I don't want to talk outside of my purview of expertise, but I do a lot of permitting work with wetlands in all the commissions on the Cape. And I've always found it, whenever the applicant tries to compare the proposed project with another site, it's a very slippery slope, because the commission always says every site is site-specific, the conditions on the site are unique, the project is unique to that site. There are so many variables that have to do with salt marsh regarding, for example, the east-west orientation versus north-south. You get more shading on one, less on the other. Length, height, width of the piles, and width of the walkway. Our report was submitted to rebut a statement that the former chair, Mr. Chase, said last hearing. You cited a specific dock as an example, so we went out and did a study of that specific dock, and we did not find findings. We did not find scouring or salt marsh shading the way that it was represented at the hearing, and we wanted to present that evidence. We're not trying to go say that there's no scour anywhere in Harwich. We're simply rebutting something that was said. So I would respectfully submit that the proper focus of the commission is not on one side or the other to make a point, but to review the project under your regulations. And your regulations contemplate docks, ramps, floats, and we have complied with the regulations, and we've done everything that we can to address the concerns. And we would respectfully submit, as we said earlier, that there are no significant adverse effects from this particular project.
If I could just follow up just quickly, I would not call the letter from August 10th, 2021 a study. It's really a collection of photographs and observations. There's no empirical evidence recorded. There's no information on chute densities, biomass. It really is not a study. It's a collection of information.
I didn't call it a study, I called it a report.
I just heard you.
It's titled report.
Okay.
So yes, it's some independent photographs taken currently, and my assessment of those, my professional assessment of what I saw and what I didn't see. And I agree with you, pile scour probably exists somewhere, but it didn't in the examples that I cited, and it didn't specifically exist in the examples of the new designs that have been accepted. And that's what we should be talking about. The old docks they're not part of this. They're just not. They're irrelevant. Because the new designs work.
The shading, yes.
Huh?
I agree in terms of shading.
Well,
not in terms
okay,
of scour.
fine, but the docks are elevated now. Those docks are elevated substantially enough that the marsh is coming back very quickly. You have to agree to that. You have to understand that's what the pictures show. So that shows that these new designs are working, and that's the design that's proposed here. Not a one-to-one that we could propose that. It would meet your bylaws. There would be no argument. But we feel that these new designs are the ones that work, so we're sticking with that new standard. I don't know why you should even complain about that. It's above and beyond, and there's photographic evidence and evidence from the commission that shows that these new designs work to eliminate permanent impacts.
If I can follow up, again, it's showering versus, shading versus scouring. And I think the new designs are greatly improving shading, although the study done by John Logan, which was a published scientific study, showed even at 1 to 5, there were impacts. So again, we have to issue a variance based on those impacts.
I respectfully disagree. The question isn't whether there are impacts. We can see there are impacts. The question is whether there are significantly adverse impacts. That's the standard that needs to be applied. And I just, I'm going to use your own words against you, Mr. Chase. You faulted us for not having empirical evidence and studies. I'm hearing you say scour impacts, scour impacts, scour impacts. I haven't once heard you say to what extent. I haven't once heard you cite a study, and I haven't heard you once cite a resource value that's adversely impacted. So for example, if we have land under the ocean is a protected interest, there are certain standards that have to be met, circulation of water, displacement of sediment. You've said impact, you've said scour, but you haven't made the next connection to a resource interest value protected by your bylaw.
Right, but that responsibility is yours.
And we've made the case.
You've made an argument in two consecutive letters that really had a lot of concerning comments in them.
Well,
so, the onus is on you to make those arguments.
So I'm looking, Mr. Chase, for an objective, and let me get this, an explicit and objectively adequate reason to deny the project.
I haven't changed my opinion since the beginning. The impacts to the salt marsh from scouring and from shading, even at 1 to 5, are impacts that would require a variance, which I don't support giving. Secondly, the landing is a new structure in shellfish habitat. The Shellfish Survey's found a lot of habitat. It requires a variance. I don't support giving a variance for those 2 reasons, for those 2 resources.
So just so the record is clear, we do not agree that there's a variance needed from the salt marsh because your regulations say shall not destroy. And so if there's a shading impact, again, to make the connection, you would have to show that it destroys salt marsh. And we contend that our project does not. So therefore, there's no variance required. Plus, there's 100 square feet of salt marsh restoration proposed. So our project as a whole actually adds salt marsh. It doesn't destroy salt marsh.
See, that's your contention. I disagree.
And let's disagree there and kind of move on.
Yeah.
I think what Brian's trying to say is that once we've provided empirical evidence, now the burden of proof is on the board. We've provided evidence from 4 experts.
Well, that's not exactly true, Mark.
Okay.
So the way it works is we have the burden of proof, and we have submitted evidence. And if you choose not to believe our evidence, then you have to have an explicit and adequate reason on the record so that when a court reviews your decision, it can understand exactly why you denied the project.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Anything else, Brad? No, our bylaws, the language is very tight. I encourage the new members to, review those bylaws and read them carefully.
Thank you. Thank you for all that research that you've done on this. Mark, any questions?
No, but I will say that last time we came to a vote, I did vote to support the project. I still do. And I think you've done a very commendable job in minimizing any possible damage. And I think we have come to a point where we're splitting hairs, and I think it's time to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Stan?
I have nothing to say at this point.
John?
Yeah, I have a question. Could you go back and read again the quote that you read at the beginning of your presentation, Mark, from
Greg's
Berman?
From Greg's letter?
Would you please?
Certainly. I can read it right from his report. I have it here. So the first statement he made on page 2, bottom of page 2 said, and I'll quote, "The monopile footprints could likely be considered so relatively small as to be negligible, parentheses, AKA de minimis." And
That's not what you read. There was more before what you just read. I'd like you to read the whole thing, please.
there was another statement, but that is, I'll read it here. "The monopile footprints could likely be considered so relatively small as to be negligible, parentheses, AKA de minimis." Now, the first thing that I said was on the back page of his report, and he says on the 3rd bullet, "If the proposed height to width adequately protects the marsh, then the 2 monopiles, parentheses, with less than 2 square feet of impact, unparentheses, will likely have less impact than foot traffic and kayak launching." That's a quote from his report.
So that starts with a conditional. He doesn't say anything about whether it actually will adequately protect salt marsh, right? He just says, if it does. I heard Brad a few minutes ago say that Greg Berman is not an expert on salt marsh. So I'm wondering how we're supposed to interpret that statement. It's like, if this is the case, then it'll be fine. But where's the evidence that that is in fact the case?
So I have a couple things to say, if I may, Mr. Ketchum. So Mr. Berman is a coastal geologist, so he would be an expert on scour. And so if he was going to find scouring impacts, it would have come from Mr. Berman. And I think that's why, we had the study done. Secondly, the language that he uses comes from regulations. The word where he said, what was it, less than, no, the other one.
Oh, de minimis?
Yeah, the less than.
Negligible, AKA
Yeah,
de
less than
minimis.
negligible, AKA de minimis. In 310 CMR 10.23, I believe, there are supplemental definitions that complement 10.034. And there's a definition of adverse impact. What is an adverse effect? And I'm sure you have the regs here. You could
Well,
quote it.
I have the Wetlands Protection Act. I don't know if I have my regs here.
Okay, so the regulations talk about an adverse effect, and I'm going to paraphrase, is an effect that has an effect, not to use the same word in the definition, upon a resource value that's protected by the regulations, that's regulated. And then the second sentence of that says, an impact that is negligible or so small as to be disregarded is not an adverse effect. And so what I would suggest to you is what Mr. Berman is saying in the parlance of wetlands regulations is that the monopiles and the walkway will not have an adverse effect. He's using the second sentence of that regulation. And the third comment I'd like to make is you questioned us for evidence that there's not going to be shading impacts. You as a commission have adopted regulations that have said you can do certain things as long as you comply with certain regulations. And therefore, there's a presumption that if a project complies with standards that you set, that the impacts that flow from that project are acceptable. And shading, you have a regulation that requires height and width. And we're narrower than you allow, and we're higher than you allow. So there should actually be a presumption that since we've exceeded your regulations, there's not going to be a significant adverse effect from the proposed project.
I have nothing more.
Thanks. Jim?
Well, I had not been involved in the earlier discussions, so I don't think it's fair for me to make any comment on this at this time.
All right. And Alan, I'll pass on you as well, I think, at this point. I have a couple of questions. Is there a proposal for shellfish mitigation here?
Yes, in the back of my first summary on the January 8th letter, I did a ratio of the float square footage to the landing square footage. And my basic, I can go back and read it exactly, but basically.
There's no float involved here.
There's no float involved, but other dock projects are the only ones that have required shellfish mitigation, and those were related, well, it was a standard $6,000 for a dock, and a lot of those had 10 by 20 floats. So I simply offered to take a ratio of the 10 by 20 float, 200 square feet, and divide it by this landing, which is 3.5 by 4 or 14.5 square feet, and the money drops to like $460. I offered that as a starting point, because obviously I don't think that the full $6,000 would be adequate, because we're not talking about 200 square feet of float and a ramp that's in the shellfish area. I have 14 square feet, so relatively much smaller.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The other question I had, and this, Brad, you can help me with this as well. So a lot of the docks that you've cited here, as well as some of the information that I think Brad has talked about in his questioning as well, talked about docks on the Herring River. Now, this is not in the Herring River. This is in Allen's Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, balanced this because, at my comments, because I know we've been in Oyster Creek and we've seen significant scouring of some of the docks that are in there when we've done some of the tours. But my sense is the tidal flow in Allen's Harbor is not as bad as we would see on the Herring River. Is that right?
Perhaps. I didn't put a current meter in there or anything.
I think it's safe to say the velocity in Herring River is greater than Allen's Harbor.
Yeah. And that being said, then, and that's fine, Mark, you can,
Mark, I think Amy chimed in on that.
yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't blow those up. In my report that I just gave you, there are pictures of 19 Nons Way, that is on Allen Harbor, and the stud piles, that is the last dock before you get to the jetty leaving Allen Harbor, so that's actually right out in the current.
Right, so that would be more similar to the Herring River, I suspect.
Correct. So yes, I tried to get some of the properties that I visited and assumed they have permission to go to. That's what this is, the study.
Well, let me turn the question around then. Have you seen, with the other docks that are in Allen's Harbor, have you seen any evidence of scouring at any of the other docks?
Perhaps some of the older docks, but I can't get close enough to take a look. I never said that there wasn't pile scouring. That my report did not state contradictory in that regard. All I said was I photographed as many docks as I could that I felt were similar, and obviously exceedingly 10 Chase Street and 18 Strandway. And my pictures that I took did not reveal to me, and what I saw on the ground and what I photographed did not reveal to me that pile scouring was either evident and certainly not significant.
All right. Question for you, Amy. On the denial letter that we have in our file, it mentions the January 20th, 2021 denial was 6 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstentions.
Mm-hmm.
Then it goes down and mentions the February 3rd, 2021, but it doesn't give numbers as far as in favor and opposed. Do you recall what that was?
Not off the top of my head, sorry.
You-
I can look through let me see. Because that was the one, was that one withdrawn?
I didn't think so.
Was that the third hearing then? That would have been the third hearing, because there was no
February.
vote on the second, no
You got
vote
a
on the
March.
first hearing.
Right.
I'm not sure who was
It was
present,
rescinded on February 3rd,
right?
Yeah.
That was
continued
rescinded.
again in March.
So the March 17th hearing,
Well, the February 3rd, do you have the numbers on that?
No, I would
That's the
have,
one that's in Dropbox, and it's blank as far as number in favor and number opposed.
I wouldn't have it in this, I'd have to go back and listen to it.
I think you're right, that it wasn't unanimous,
I
but
didn't support
I would say it wasn't unanimous, but I don't know the split.
4-3, 5-2.
something like that, yeah, all right. And then there was a third hearing, you say?
hearing number 3 was on March 17th of '21, and that was when Amy first gave her recommendation to approve the project.
Right. Do we know how that came out, Amy?
That was 3-2.
That was continued.
3-2?
It was a motion to approve, and it was not supported,
Yeah.
three opposed, 2 supporting.
Yeah, okay. All right, just wanted to set a little history of where we've,
We're trying to catch up on minutes,
yeah, the road we've been down with this in the past. It's, I think it's somewhat helpful for everybody. All right. I have no other questions then. So I think at this point, we should entertain a motion for, so there is shellfish mitigation included in this?
Well, it hadn't been discussed further than my offer of the $460 based on a ratio.
Does
If you
anyone
want to
have any,
discuss that, I'm more than happy to.
any comments, questions? You feel that's adequate, Amy?
I think that combined with the Marsh, the Marsh edition, it is adequate. Considering for what is seaward of mean high water is very minimal in this case, structure-wise.
Yeah.
So,
I had also given a ratio of the amount of square footage that seeding would sorry, that seed would seed, if I can say it that way. $6,000 at a 10% survival rate seeds 109,000 square feet. The same survival rate based on $460 of seed would still seed over 7,300 square feet. That was in my my summary, the last project summary that I submitted.
Okay.
In that paragraph.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, so the point is that shellfish mitigation is proposed, as is salt marsh, but the commission has discretion in that matter. And so if that's going to get us to yes, the applicant's willing to abide by the commission's decision on that.
So it sounds like you're asking if we feel that whether the shellfish mitigation should be increased.
No, I'm not asking that, but I was saying that if you feel that it needs to be, you have discretion in that area.
Yeah.
So, in other words, the offer that Mark has made, we're off, we can't point to a specific formula for this type of project, so we're in an area that is gray.
Subject to negotiation.
Yeah, and so if the commission is satisfied, I think Amy just said that the 2 mitigations proposed were adequate. If the commission feels otherwise, you have discretion in that area.
All right.
We can certainly discuss that, yeah.
Anybody have any comments, questions on that? All right. Any comments from the audience on this project? Hearing none. Okay, so can we have a motion, please?
I would move to approve the notice of intent for 28 Wahwatese with the inclusion of the shellfish mitigation as proposed.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Well, for the record, I'll second it then. And we have all in favor?
Can I ask a point of, while we're in the middle there, can I ask a clarification? Mark, you said the shellfish mitigation. Do you only want the shellfish mitigation and not the marsh restoration?
No, both.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And I've seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
No.
So we're back to 3-2 again.
No. Wait.
Yeah.
Well, 3-2, sorry.
2-3 then.
Well, yeah, but the motion was to approve. That motion failed.
Failed,
So it's a
correct.
failed motion. The project is not denied unless another motion is made.
And I would like to make a motion to deny unless the proponent wishes to continue for any particular reason. I feel like we've heard this project a lot, and I'd like to move on. You know, there is recourse, you know, with an appeal. It's the 5th hearing. I'd like to move forward.
We're not asking for a continuance.
Okay, then I make a motion that the project is denied under the Wetlands Protection Act, Salt Marsh 310 CMR 10-32 for adverse impacts to salt marsh. Also, Wetlands Protection Act, land containing shellfish 310 CMR 10.34, adverse impacts to shellfish. And then also under our bylaws and regulation, Harwich Water Dependent Structures Bylaw 304-8G, and the Harwich Wetlands Protection Regulation 110.3B7, and this states that any structure shall not destroy any portion of a salt marsh or substratum, as well as our bylaw protecting shellfish, which is Bylaw 304-8H, and Harwich Wetlands Protection Regulation 110.3B8. No structure shall be located within 50 feet of an existing eelgrass bed or within a shellfish area defined by town bylaws in the town shellfish warden. That is my motion.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. So 3-2, it passes.
I can't believe you guys did that. After your agent has stated that she can't write a
We're
substantive
done, Mark.
denial.
Mark,
Yeah,
we're
we're
done.
done, all right. I can't believe it. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. You ignored
Take a look at your letter,
professional
Mark.
opinion. You've ignored
Take a
professional
look at your
opinion.
letter. Your letters.
All right, the next item on the agenda is another notice of intent for 17 Indigo
You tried to
Lane.
break the rules, too, by submitting that
Mark,
evidence.
that's enough.
Yeah, it's enough already. It's amazing. Thanks, Brad.
Next, we have a notice of intent for 17 Indigo Lane, a proposal for a one-bedroom dwelling on a vacant lot.
It's been a while. Do you want the cards?
I'll take them if you got them,
Right,
that's
we
fine.
got
You
'em.
just so you know, in the future, you can always scan them and send them to us.
Perfect.
But I'll take them.
I don't know if we did that or not. I don't have that.
Take what you got.
Oh, we got them. We got one rogue and the rest are all.
I mean, if you want, it's, I can scan it tomorrow. Okay, I'll take them. Thank you.
All right, deep breath. My name is Dan Ojala. I'm a land surveyor and civil engineer with Downkeep Engineering in Yarmouthport. And we're helping Ken Tomasian, who's one of the nicer folks I've ever met. He's a builder, and he does a lot of, not affordable, but de facto affordable housing around the Cape. And he does a lot of these smaller lots, and this is kind of the problem child of this little neighborhood. It's a large subdivision. It was done late 60s, early 70s, I believe, but this was, if you look at the assessor's map, you can see there's an old road down to the Herring River here, and judging by the borrow pits that you can see along the river, they're probably back in the turn of the century, some cranberry bogs that people were, nickel and diming along the river there and had borrowed some sand from. But so this is a lot. It's got a house on either side of it, and along in 96 comes the Rivers Act, which prevents additional challenges here. We have a slope and a small lot. We're in a wellhead protection zone. So without an IA system, you only get one bedroom. I think with an IA, we could squeeze two in there, but we're not asking for that. We're just going to keep it. He puts deed restrictions on one-bedroom homes and has good luck selling them to, just elderly couples and people without families. So that's what he's proposing here. It's a box of a house. The lot slopes from the front to the back. 96, as I said, the Rivers Act comes in, so they've got resources. We're outside of the 100 with almost everything we're doing here from the bordering vegetated wetland along the river. But by necessity, we are within the riverfront impact because it's got that huge 200-foot reach. The regulations do address lots which predated the Rivers Act in 96, and they say a number of things, but basically sort of a maximum feasible compliance language in there that the approving authority, shall allow a single-family house, a driveway, a septic system if needed. You just have to keep the grading to what you have to around the house, keep it tight, and you can go ahead and approve that. So you're on firm grounds to approve a home on here. The Health Department in Harwich is very strict. This is an environmentally sensitive area and a lot that's near a wetland, so they do not allow any variances. There's a number of ways you can get into variance trouble in Title V. One of them is with a sloping lot like this. You have to meet breakout. And the reason that we can't really put the system on the side of the lot is because you can only have 3 foot of cover over the leaching field. And so you'd end up with a tremendous, I would state that you could do that, but you'd have a tremendous wall on the uphill and a tremendous wall on the downhill side. We're dealing with about a 25% slope here or so, and by the time you run, especially if you're trying to get even a reasonable sized house like this, it'd be a trench style system, which would be 35 feet long, and you'd be dropping 10 or more feet across the system in that area. So we've done kind of the best we can with this. Again, Ken doesn't want to build a mansion here. It's a modest home. We've terraced it off. We're respecting the 100-foot buffer to the wetland with the leaching. We did talk about in the alternatives analysis about trying to tuck it up into the driveway to put these any sort of a system in the front. Well, to back up, the house right now is proposed 25 feet off the road. That's the minimum that's allowed in the district. The front yard setback, I think we've got 25 foot 1 inch, so we've really tucked it up to try and avoid the impact of the home on the rear of the lot, which has this more sensitive resource areas. The good news on this is that the septic system is high and dry. You're looking at, or one of the most important things to look at with a septic is, oftentimes you have a low area with a high groundwater table. Here, the groundwater in the river, you can see the contours around 23, 24. Assuming it comes up to 24, you've got 18 feet between the bottom of the leaching and the water table. So that's a tremendous, nice dry sand filter. Again, the 1 bedroom, you're treading fairly light with the nitrogen to begin with, but then the pathogens, the viruses and the bacteria that can spread that is present in wastewater is, primarily removed by the biofilter or the layer, the biomat that grows around a leaching when it's mature, but also by the dry sand underneath. When Dave Feo and Waite redid Title V, they did a big study for the DEP, when they were redoing Title V in '95, determined that the vertical separation was much more important than the horizontal separation. When a virus gets down into the water table, it can travel, but what filters it out is nice dry sand where you can have bacteria and viruses that can attack the bad ones, and they bind up and absorb into the soil. And so I think you can feel very comfortable that with 18 feet of dry sand under this system, even though it's 100 feet from the wetland there, it is a safe system for the environment, and at one bedroom is not very impactful. This is a huge neighborhood. There's houses all around it, and it's a pretty modest proposal. So, I'm not going to sit here and say we can't do this or can't do that, but I would say, just in general terms, if you're trying to get a reasonable sized little Cape house like this on there, you can't really put the system in the front without pushing the house towards the back, and that comes with its own issues, and moves all the activity closer to the river. So perhaps that isn't the smartest thing. And with the side, without filling in the basement, you need a 20-foot distance from a full basement to a leaching, and you can see we've only about 34 there. You need 10 off the lot line, so you could squeeze a little 4-foot wide system in that corner there. There's things you could do, but we think what we've proposed here is pretty reasonable. Again, the DEP goes through a number of items with the riverfront, but then at the end of the day, it does say that you are allowed to have a house on there. Just keep it tight to the house and as minimal as you can. What we'd propose, and we had some interactions with Amy, and heard back that perhaps we could look at some mitigation costs. When you're in a riverfront and you have a disturbed lot, one of the nice things that you can do is restore some lawn and mitigate on-site impact at least a 1-to-1 ratio or a 3-to-1 ratio. Here it's a virgin site, and Ken doesn't own any other land in Harwich to offset it. And it is, again, it's a the pricing what it is, it's very hard to make a nickel these days, and he's not a high-end builder. He's a good guy that provides housing, and he drives an older truck. He's just a good guy, and he's providing a good service here. What he'd propose is $1,000 towards what we can do. And then the other thing, which I think is important, is in the back there, why don't we put a split rail fence along the 100-foot buffer and just wildflower seed the back and let it go and restore. You can see how in the back, those older borrow pits, which had some regrading, have filled in. They're nice native forests now. You'll have a full 100-foot buffer to the back. And the land back there isn't worth much to us. It'll be just a gentle 3-to-1 slope. I'm not that 3-to-1's gentle, but you could physically mow it with a mower. But let's let that go back to seed. We'll put some ground cedar and some wildflower mix there, and let that be natural. And perhaps if the board entertains, just a fence right along the 100 line, and you'll have that full more than 100 to the river and a full 100 to the bordering vegetated wetland around the river that will go back and to its natural state. And we'll be happy enough with our little house up in the front and a little tiny side yard. We're doing everything we can, and we think on the site. All the roof runoff is put into dry wells. We've leveled the back off a little bit. Most of the activity will happen, in that little level area behind the house, and then, maybe over to the 100 in the septic. You might have a little bit of lawn there, but you'll have in excess of 100 to the river and a full 100 to the wetland. Roof dry wells for all the runoff, grading the site out to the street. We think it'll be a good addition to the neighborhood and protect the environment, and are very hopeful that under the Act, you could find that this meets your local regulation. Take $1,000 and use it to good use off-site, and we'll button up to the 100 and be glad to propose that. But that would be the presentation. I'd certainly be glad to answer any questions or dive into anything in more detail if you need.
Thank you very much. Amy, you have comments?
Thank you. My only comments are, are there ways that we can grade or minimize as we can, it is a virgin lot and it's an undisturbed lot. So are there ways that we can further minimize impacts to the outer riparian zone, the 1 to 200 foot area from the river? One of my suggestions was putting a wall of sorts behind the septic system to eliminate the need to grade that little about 300 square foot area. I would either be okay with that or with what Mr. Ojala said, which is putting, disturbing it, doing the grading, and then putting the split rail fence up pretty much along the 100-foot buffer to the wetland. I would just say not just seed it, but to add, it's a small enough area, I don't think we need a planting plan if this turns out to it, but, sweet pepper bush or something like that, which is what is currently growing as a shrub layer on that property. And it wouldn't amount to a whole lot of plants in that area. So either the wall, so that farther to the seaward, if you will, of the septic isn't disturbed, or when all is said and done, the split rail along the 100-foot. I would be okay with either. I would say either of those accomplishes similar things. It looks like stones in the back of the house. Dan, is that kind of going to be a flat area? Is it a walkout basement?
Exactly, yeah.
So, I mean, that's not meant to really have any height. It's just meant to define a little area out there.
Well, it does have a little bit of height. Again,
Okay.
We're dealing with a real ski slope here.
Yep.
So, the first floor is up around 60, that's around 52 and a half.
Okay.
And then what we show down there is about 48, so about 4
About 4
foot
feet,
drop.
okay.
Yeah, it is a 4-foot drop.
And as you're showing here, so with riverfront, hardscape counts, obviously, but you're not proposing any hardscape type patio there. It could just be Cape Cod lawn, essentially.
Correct.
I just want to be clear on that. Another way to potentially minimize is instead of a paved driveway, the commission could condition a pervious gravel or shell driveway. That is getting towards the outer part of the riparian up by the road, or you could condition some sort of a drain or swale along the side if you were worried about runoff. But other than that, I think you've tucked it in as well as you can. I will say, I think that you're protecting the most important part of the lot, which really is that 100-foot buffer to the wetland that abuts the river itself, and not disturbing that. This lot is in between it's in a neighborhood. There's houses on either side. This house is actually proposed to be closer to the road than some of the abutting ones. So from my professional opinion is like for habitat fragmentation, you're not contributing to that in any way by putting this house up close to the street. You're protecting what's important in the back. And doing a split rail along the 100-foot buffer will help, or living fence or something will help prevent future encroachment into that sensitive area. So that kind of just goes to what's left is really the mitigation piece. Can't do on-site because it's already a naturally vegetated lot. Can't do off-site, so then the other option is potentially in this in lieu fee, which we have in our bylaw, which the Attorney General has 4 more days to approve, hopefully. And that is specific. The commission does call out $4 per square foot. And that was, a specific calculation was used to do that $4 per square foot. So, you are offering 1,000, and just to make it clear to the audience, that money has to be used to improve wetlands in other parts of Harwich. It's not a fund that we can do anything with. It's very specific what we can use that money for. So if you take that into account, it's in the $6,000 range that mitigation would cost for this project to take place. So just to stay consistent with our regulations and what we have required are 1 or 2 other people already. It is all contingent upon the Attorney General approving this, which was a town meeting approval this past May. But with the condition to stay consistent with what we are typically going to be requiring, I would recommend the $4 a square foot, which is about the $6,000 range is mitigation. But with that, I could recommend approval of the project.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you want to lead it off?
Yeah, for the most part, I would agree with Amy's assessment. I've never really been a supporter of the in lieu fees. And in this application, I would really prefer to see renaturalizing on the outer perimeters of the lots. I don't know what the calculations would be there, what the square footage would be, but when you take away the land that's going to be cleared from the edge of the building to the lot line on either side for the sake of working, you're going to have 20 feet of clear ground just to be able to work there. So if the depth of that building is roughly 30 feet, you know, you've got an easy 1,500 square feet of real estate that can be renaturalized between both sides. To me, that seems like a consideration, and it is outside the 100. To me, it seems like a viable option. But overall, I mean, I see some other options for the configuration, but I think this is probably the least invasive in general. That's what I have for now.
I would agree to somewhat minimize maybe what would have been the Cape Cod lawn area a little bit more.
Yeah.
Sides.
It just strikes me what we're talking about here. We got to be a little bit careful with that, because if we disturb a big area and then restore it, we're getting credit. That's not what we should be doing, you know?
No, but
So
what
we just
is
have to be
better?
careful with that. But,
Right.
you know, what the rules say is, you know, you do disturb the minimum amount possible. And to the point, I think we absolutely can restore that rear slope, put it back natural, could probably tighten up the sides a little bit. But that doesn't touch your $6,000 because that's a hardscape rule.
True,
And,
too. Yeah, that's
you know,
fair.
I mean, but, you know, this board has discretion, and in lieu fees they're a slippery slope, and, you know, it may or may not be approved by the Attorney General. I know Barnstable, I think, has one that held up. You know, and, you know, but again, you know, there's not a lot of meat on the bone on this project, and we felt it was a pretty compressed. Ken would really appreciate, you know, if we could revegetate perhaps half those and do the 1,000, if the board could feel that. And again, what you're setting up here is a situation where, because of this particular lot is almost entirely within the riverfront, except for, you know, the driveway. You can't mitigate on site based on your regulation. You just can't do it because it's natural already. So you either have to have deep pockets and have an off-site space, or pay money. And boy, it seems a little onerous on a, you know, it seems like a big tax on a lot. You know, maybe the owner can help Ken out a little bit with this, you know, when he buys it, but that's a big chunk of change for this small potatoes operation. So whatever discretion you can have, we sure would appreciate. It's not like we've got a big lawn where we can mitigate on site. I think and Barnstable has been very successful with that, and you will be too, I'm sure. But when it comes to a naturalized site, the bylaw has its challenges.
In the commission, you do have the discretion to grant a variance from the stringency of your mitigation requirements, so it's up to the commission.
But I mean, if we could revegetate, you know, 10-foot strips, full 10-foot in from where we need to clear just to get the dry wells in the ground and get the grading and get the house built, and that made the difference to go down to about $1,000, we sure would appreciate it. I just leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Stan?
Yeah, I guess I would kind of what you're saying, Dan, try to minimize or do as much mitigation on there, and the addition with the in lieu fees. I guess my only concern is if we start making exceptions all the time, then we have a consistency, issue, and then
Yeah.
how do we decide from one to the other? So I guess my preference, and I understand what you're saying, it's a small operation, but at the same time, I believe in being consistent with trying to abide by the mitigation rules. And again, hopefully, within 4 days, we'll know whether it's even viable or not. I mean,
Well, we're not one to roll the dice, so.
I know.
But, so, fair point, but again, every site is unique, and you can't have too many 16,000-foot lots that are 100% in a riverfront around. This is a pretty unique little site, and it's got houses on either side, and it's an older subdivision. The Wetlands Protection Act specifically allows either 5,000 feet or, whatever you can do to just get your house on there. And, I think we've tightened it up almost as tight as we can, and mitigating it back. Perhaps you could find a way to make an exception in this instance.
Thanks, John. John?
So, first I'm going to repeat the question I asked you today, Amy. Maybe someone else in the crowd, like a lawyer who happens to be here, might have an answer, which is what happens if the Attorney General does not respond 4 days, by whatever the deadline is, does that mean that they've accepted it if there is no ruling directly, or is it just we have to sit around and wait till they respond?
Yeah, I still don't know that answer. Was they not able to get that answer today? That if the
I don't know
AG
that
did not
answer either.
get
I
back
mean,
to us.
My general understanding is that you have to have the Attorney General's approval.
Okay, so
that,
it's a
yeah.
pocket veto.
It's
unless
either a
you
pocket
respond.
veto where there may be some reasons for delay.
I see. Yeah, well, right. Okay. So that aside, that's a really nice undisturbed lot. So it's a little sad to see it go, but on the other hand, affordable housing, I guess using that term loosely, is a big problem in Harwich and all over the Cape. So I support seeing this thing built, and I understand and agree with the notions that it's important to be consistent. But in this case, I'm I generally support the in lieu of fees, but this is a different kind of situation from my point of view, and I would be in favor of trying to work something out. I would hate to find that if we insisted on $6,000, that the developer was gonna back away. You're suggesting that, I don't know how to, or you're implying that, you're not even suggesting.
He was hurt by it, I'll tell you that,
Well,
he's not a rich man.
I don't know how to discount that, I don't know how to interpret that, but I'm just saying we should work something out and make this thing go ahead somehow. My suggestion would be to find a way to split the difference maybe, but I'm not inclined to be a stickler about the $6,000. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Brett?
Yeah, I appreciate all the arguments. I think it looks like you've done as good a job as possible to minimize impacts. Still concerned about a lot that close to Herring River. We've got a requirement to reduce nitrogen loading in the Herring River. We have a eutrophication problem in the Herring River, so I would be inclined to maintain our regulations for mitigation and then see what happens. If the Attorney General does not approve this, then we come back and we talk about it. I'm real worried about giving exemptions. I'm real worried about what might happen with that going forward. I also think this lot's gonna have a value of $400,000 or so. So $6,000 is not that much. I think that I would prefer not giving any exemptions now. I wish we could find a way to make that buffer zone qualify, but it sounds like it really doesn't. What if they enhance the vegetation type over what's there? Is that just mixing things up?
I was hesitant to suggest that because sometimes the commission says that enhancing a natural lot isn't necessarily mitigation. I think here, what's nice about this lot is there's almost no invasives. There's a couple out front right by the road, but other than that, there's none.
Sweet pepper bush back there.
There's some sweet pepper, but I would say there is some, the shrub layer is a little bit lacking, potentially a little bit lacking on that site. So, I mean, there is some fairly large gaps. There you have a big canopy and understory layer, but you don't have much of a ground cover or shrub layer there. So if the commission saw fit that in lieu of the mitigation that they're offering in monetary, maybe that's something that could be worked out, not to completely fill it in by any means, but to whatever the, how many square feet of disturbance do you have, Dan?
I don't know that I have it memorized.
I have
but-
it here somewhere, hold on.
Probably, I mean, we could
We
just do a-
typically would require a 2-to-1, so, but that looks like, I mean, that's
Probably
very
about 9.
spaced out. I mean, this would be, these plantings, if you were going this route,
Yeah.
plantings could be essentially sprinkled in. We spot locate that where things are gonna go if you wanted to create a bit of a denser buffer out there, because there are some voids.
There might be a way to reduce the 2-to-1 and still have the remain go towards the in-lieu fee. And, because you've got a lot of square footage, right?
Well, so just keep in mind that this lot does not go all the way down to the river. If you look on the site plan.
Yep.
It only goes like kind of to the 50-foot buffer-ish. The 50-foot buffer crisscrosses it. Actually down as you get closer to the river is where it is more densely shrubby.
Something, you know, if we take the canopy down around the house, it'll probably get a little more light in there, and that'll infill
Yeah.
naturally too, you know,
I do think
so
it's because it's so dense. I mean, it is
probably have a little bit of trouble getting the sunlight, you know, everything's competing for the sunlight, and, you know, that could, I mean, not that clearing is great, but, I mean, it has some benefits on the fringe.
I mean, I'm always a proponent of trying to make the actual site better rather than do it in lieu fee as well. So, I mean, if the commission saw fit that some on-site planting with, we could get a square footage essentially, we could and then we could use that to calculate plants. But if you saw fit to do that, I'm fine with that too.
It wouldn't cover all the 2-to-1, so, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Top of my head.
We worked real hard on the in-lieu fee, so I'd hate to like have a variance to it, you know, so early on. And if it doesn't pass, then, you know, you come back and we work on it.
It's an amendment, yeah.
You get out of jail free, I thought.
Well, basically, you're not hearing great objections, you know, to what you're presenting, so
Yeah.
it's really, how do we make our rules work with this site?
Yeah, it's a pretty unique site that you're all in, and, you know, it's kind of a modest home compared to a lot of the things you look at.
I am concerned about, you know, filling in each of these marginal lots in town with houses. And, you know, we're trying to reduce our nitrogen loading in the Herring River, and that's not gonna help us do it. So this one seems like it's permittable, but I'm concerned about giving exemptions to the in-lieu fee.
So, I mean,
The
just out of
in-lieu is a
curiosity.
full-on hardscape regulation, right? It's not about clearing, really.
It's not about clearing. We didn't, it was too ambiguous to have to do it that way.
I agree, it's something that's tangible.
That's why we did the hardscape. And so if you said 10% of your building coverage is, the lot's 10%, and your lot size is 16,777, so taking out the driveway, I think you're about 15,000, or 15.
Yeah, most of the driveway's not
100
in.
square feet roughly is your hardscape,
Mm-hmm.
this lot. That's building,
Well,
everything.
you know, if you guys are reluctant to do the 6,000, I just, maybe we could just let her go as is. We'll if it would be acceptable to the board, I'll present a revised plan showing a split rail fence at the 100 and a full revegetation of everything, for lack of a better term, riverward or seaward of that. And we'll, I'll tighten up the side a little bit, but basically be what we have here, and we'll cough up the 6,000, and hopefully Ken can work it out with the seller, you know, a little bit of an adjustment, and that'll be what it is. So that way you won't have to vary your new regulation.
I'm misunderstanding a little bit here. Are you saying both revegetation and?
So.
I was gonna say that.
So,
it's-
we have no problem revegetating.
Along the line.
Yeah, that's, you know, again, to your point, a retaining wall is very expensive. And it's a lot cheaper for us just to, you know, loam and seed, you know, seed it and let it grow back in, I think.
Do a couple plants, yeah.
Yeah, and then nobody falls off and breaks their neck, so it's just more natural, it's a better habitat.
Fine.
So we'll do that, and then, you know, if you guys are acceptable to it, that'll be that, and we'll pay the $6,000.
Well, you do have, I mean, we have two more
Not
people
done,
that
yeah,
speak,
no,
but
no.
I think you're hearing
Seems like.
general like favor for this project so far, just.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the matter of the dollars and cents.
Yeah.
Jim, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a few, and if I could ask Dan a few questions. Dan, I guess one of the main questions I had was if you could clarify for me why you couldn't move the septic system further away from the river by either putting it in the front yard or the side yard beyond the driveway?
So with the house selection that we have, because, you know, if you put a matchbox on, there's more room, but, with what we feel is, you know, a fairly modest footprint, it was at 10%, on a very small lot. You need to have a 20-foot separation, to the full basement and a 10-foot separation to the lot line. So, to put any width of a septic in, you need a full 30 feet. So you can look on the north side, there's no room, it's 20. In the front, it's 25, so that's not 30. The only place that you could put any kind of a system, which would have to be much thinner and longer, would be either under the driveway or down that left side. That's an area that's sharply sloping. So it would be two things. One, and you're right, that would be a little bit further from the river, but again, the vertical separation, as I said, I feel as a design professional is more important than a horizontal separation. You could do it, but you'd have retaining walls to try and level the land to avoid a variance. And where we have it now, it's an area it's fairly level, but we're just going to, you know, basically infill a little bit of a swale. There is a strip out on this because there's a little lens of clay down, you know, 8 feet or so, which is unfortunate, but we'll re-level that, and it meets code within 3 feet, and we don't need to pump it if we did have a convenience sink in the basement. So to put it in the side, you could do it. You would lose your ability to have a drain go into the floor in the basement, and you'd need, you know, fairly expensive retaining walls to level the land. So those are the reasons we chose not to do that.
And Dan, the retaining walls, would they be above ground retaining walls or?
Yeah, well, it would be a tier situation, so you've got a slope, you'd have to cut in on the high side and fill a little on the low side to get the length that you'd need to put that trench in.
But it would be physically possible to do that.
With money, you can do anything, and you could do it, especially if you adjusted the house, you know, lost some basement space or something like that. But we can't have a variance to the Title V, and you'd be looking at variances without some significant retaining walls due to the slope.
Okay, but again, it would be possible.
If we move the house back, and I would say, again, it's, you know, maybe not the greatest idea to move all the population further to the back, then you could squeeze one certainly under the driveway and maybe in the front yard. If you went back, say, 35 instead of 25, you'd have room to put it in the front. And, you know, it wouldn't be the end of the world for us, but again, I don't know that moving all the site to the back is wise when you have 18 foot of dry sand under the leaching already. That horizontal distance is you know, it's already 100, and it would be a little more, 130, but the benefit of that, I think, is less than, in my judgment, less than having the whole house and all its associated, you know, people in the back and so forth moving closer to the river.
Okay, you say move the house back. How far would you have to move the house back?
I would estimate 10 feet to get the septic in the front.
Okay, but 10 feet, you're not even coming back as far as where the septic is located on this plan, right?
Oh, yeah, we're not talking about in the river or anything. It is moving the center of mass of all the occupation and compressing that back a little bit.
Yeah, and even with moving the house back 10 feet, you still have less activity, you know, closer to the river.
Well, from a septic perspective, yes,
Yeah,
but
you get the septic
the
tank
barbecue
out of
is
there.
getting closer, you know, or whatever they're doing back there.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
in my mind, that might be something that this commission should be considering.
Yes, fair enough, but I would remind the board that it fully meets Title V and the local regulations to the letter of the law. And generally, when you do that, the presumption is, you're in pretty good shape. I think you guys would have to prove an adverse effect at that
No,
point.
and I understand that, Dan, but Title V is a different regulatory entity than what we're dealing with here.
It is, but your guidance documents on that are pretty clear that if you don't need any variances, it's, again, you have a lot of discretion. I wouldn't argue with that.
And then the only other comments that I had, Mr. Chairman, are with regard to the in lieu mitigation. I would be very reluctant to adjust what is in our regulations at this point unless we had worked through clear guidance as to how we made the determination on that type of adjustment. And that is something that if we want to do it, we can certainly do it. But it's going to take time for us to work through those clear standards by which we might consider reducing the amount of an in lieu contribution for mitigation. The other thing on mitigation is that I think I might disagree a little bit in that I don't really consider, sort of enhancement of existing, as long as the existing is not causing problems, as mitigation. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Alan, any comments?
Well, being my first meeting here with the Conservation Commission, I'm all in favor of moving things forward in a positive fashion with the onus on the applicant. And I think that the engineer, the designer, has met the requirements per the code. It's a vacant lot's been sitting there. I'm very familiar with that whole neighborhood up there. My only comment, concern is the curb cut when you come off Indigo Right Road. There's gonna be a berm there so water doesn't, because that's quite a swale coming down that hill. It's not gonna run into the property. It's not supposed to run on the property. I think housing is needed, as mentioned, Mr. Ketchum. I don't know much about the in lieu mitigations. I gotta read up on that. But when this is built, the town's gonna receive taxes, and the town should be able to utilize the funds that come from this improved lot in a homestead for somebody, so that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my thoughts on this are pretty much the same as has been expressed. My preference is to keep the house as close to the road as possible to preserve the rear habitat, which I think you've done here. As far as moving the septic system, you mentioned the 18 feet to the water table. I mean, that seems more than acceptable where it is right now, other than the fact that there is some disturbance in the 100 by leaving it in the back of the house, but I think that's minimal. And with respect to the in lieu fees, yeah, I am with everybody else on that they're so new to us. There's no hardship shown here necessarily, other than it'd be nice to reduce them, but that really doesn't justify a hardship from my perspective. So, and I think that the $6,000, $6,320, I think, based on Amy's calculations here, is appropriate given the pristine nature of this lot. And I mean, we've had other lots similar to this that we have allowed structures to be built on them, subject to the full in lieu fees that, once they're passed, would be due and payable. So I'm with everybody, I think, as far as the comments that have been made so far. Stan?
Can I just make one other comment regarding that? Again, the in lieu fees are really mitigation, and we don't typically make exceptions to our mitigation. And that's why I feel we should keep our, we shouldn't be making exceptions. We wouldn't be making exceptions typically to mitigation. In lieu fees are nothing more than mitigation, in effect. So that's the only additional comment I want to make.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the audience? Attendees, anything? Anybody on the phone?
Star 6 if you're on the phone.
Star 6 if you're on the phone. All right, hearing none. I guess we're at the point where we can entertain a motion on this. Any questions?
Again, through the chair, my offer, I think is a pretty good one, and it sounds like we're all on the same page, but we're very happy to put the rail fence at the 100 and have it go natural seaward of that. So if that's a condition, we're happy to comply.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the notice of intent for 17 Indigo Lane, map 80, parcel D112, with the conditions that a split rail fence be established along the 100-foot buffer, the 100-foot setback from the bordering vegetated wetland, and that everything downgrade toward the river from there be vegetated subsequent to development.
And do we have to include the in-lieu fees? Does it
And, thank you, that the applicant, pending approval by the Attorney General, be required to pay the $6,320. $6,320 in lieu fees, and if the Attorney General fails to approve the in lieu fee bylaw, we need to come back and amend the approval.
Thank you.
Does that cover the whole thing?
I think it does.
I think so. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's unanimous. Great.
Okay, great, and that covers the variance or whatever we needed, that motion would.
Yes.
We did
Yeah,
ask for
yeah,
that finally.
Very good.
All right, well, I appreciate your help and careful consideration very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 5 Fiddler's Landing, map 6, parcel A1-8, to demo and replace a single-family dwelling and make site improvements. I think it's a follow-up to the presentation at the last hearing where we were going to have, we had some open issues with respect to the plantings and mitigation that was being proposed.
I think they're virtual.
We are. Good evening. This is Taria McGrath from Coastal Engineering, and Jen Crawford is also here to present the changes to the mitigation plan. So as mentioned, we have submitted 2 revised plans. The first revised plan is the Crawford Land Management Mitigation Plan, and then the second one is the civil plan that's been revised to be coordinated with Jen's revised plan. So Jen, do you want to explain the changes, please?
Yep, definitely. So for the record, Jen Crawford, Crawford Land Management. So when we first met on this project 2 weeks ago, you guys had a short list of items that you would like us, would have liked us to have looked at and to work with Amy with. So we have done that. And I'll just briefly touch on the revisions that we submitted. So with the salt marsh restoration piece, one of the things that you asked us to look at was a small triangle of area on the neighboring property. So we did that. That's been included with this submission. It was an additional 35 square feet of salt marsh. So that's shown on our plan. We also, there was also some discussion of an unvegetated area at the very bottom of the new revetment that had gone in, a sliver, if you will. So I verified that area with Amy, and that area is now included as that transitional high marsh. So that square footage was increased to include that area that you had referenced. So we did that. There was also a request that some of the bayberry on the coastal bank that we be a little more inclusive of some beach plums. So we were happy to make that revision. We did that. We also, I also worked with Amy to review the previous filing for the other filing for the revetment, so to speak, to take a look at that coastal bank area to just better understand the revegetation for that area and how that was presented and accepted during that project. So we, Amy had reviewed the tapes and we went through that. So we have kept the planting of the coastal bank on the plan. but we have shown the, I believe, 10 or 11 sweet fern that you had called out for in your special conditions to be planted on the coastal bank. So that area is now shown and called out as an area of planting for the other permit that is on this property. And the additional planting along the top of the revetment was hatched out on my plan before, but I included the plants on there so that you can see it, so that this hopefully is a comprehensive planting plan that includes the items that you wanted to see with the revetment, as well as the proposal with this project. So a few of the plant numbers were updated to accommodate for those changes, and our total proposed mitigation number with those additions did go up a little bit, even though we did minus out the area on the coastal bank for the sweet fern. And so that revised mitigation number is shown on my plan. It's still over what your regulations ask for. And I think that hit all of the items from the first hearing that you had wanted us to address. So if I've forgotten anything, let me know, or if you have any questions about any of those, I will do my best to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Thank you. I think Crawford and Coastal addressed my concerns that I had at the last meeting, the primary one being whether or not the revegetation on the bank after construction of the revetment, whether that revegetation was just simply to revegetate or if it was to be considered as mitigation, and it is not called mitigation in the previous filing. Really, if you remember what the bank was previously, it was some invasives and then the really big beach plum, but the ground covers were pretty much just grass. So we had conditioned a grass mix with some sweet ferns. So what they did was still included the sweet ferns in this matrix. But the grass, again, it wasn't as mitigation before. So I think the area should still count. With the filling in of that 35 square foot triangle between this property and the neighbors for the salt marsh, that's great. Revegetating that bare finger to the north of the dock, kind of between the marsh and the bank itself is a benefit. And so they've addressed all of my questions that I had. I would just, so they're required to do 1,760 square feet of mitigation. They're proposing 2,171, and all the plantings I think are appropriate for this site. So I would recommend approval with no fertilizer or chemical application, an annual monitoring report to be submitted detailing progress of the mitigation planting, a 90% survival rate at certificate of compliance time, and that what we sometimes see, and I think we should start conditioning more aggressively, is that the mitigation plans, the revegetation plans, should really start the same or next growing season as start of construction on the home, instead of, and it is site specific. I mean, you don't want them working in the same areas, but this is on the bank and in the marsh versus the house is up at the top. So I think starting the mitigation the same or next growing season as start of construction on the home. Say for instance, the home starts construction this winter, you don't start planting this winter, you start this spring. But conditioning that it starts pretty close to each other, I think is good, rather than a lot of people tend to wait to the end of the project. I'm not saying this applicant does, but in general, as a condition.
Thank you. Mark, you want to start off? Any questions?
I have no remarks.
Stan?
I have no comments.
No comments or questions?
Brad?
Just a quick one. Thanks for all the revisions. In the proposed site plan, I just want to confirm that the trees that are shown there are going to stay. I think you did mention that at the last hearing, but those that are drawn out in the proposed site plan will remain?
That is true.
All right, thank you.
Jim?
Okay, I just have one question. This little triangle area on the neighbor's property, do you now have permission of the neighbor to pursue that?
Actually, I do not know the answer to that. Tari, do you know if we discussed that the last time we met? I don't remember.
Yeah, I believe that the owner has had conversations with the neighbor, and that they're supportive of the project. I do not have anything written that I could share with you for the approval.
Because I think it would be
It's
very helpful to.
Caroline Councilman, 5 Fiddler's Landing, the owner, and yes, we have permission to plant that
Okay,
strip.
Is that written permission?
We can certainly get that to you if desired.
I think it would be helpful either, excuse me, as a minimum, just a letter agreement, but, ideally like some type of easement to do that type of mitigation on their property. And if a copy of whatever it is could be submitted to Amy as soon as you get it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Alan, I'm going to pass on you because this is a continuation from last week's, or the last meeting we had. I have no comments. I think you've done a good job of addressing the concerns that were raised at the last meeting. And based on what's presented here, I'm comfortable with it. So with that, can we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the notice of intent for 5 Fiddler's Landing with the conditions as discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. 1 abstention.
Yes, right.
Next item on the agenda, notice of intent for Ronald and Jennifer Posh, 7 Prince Charles Drive, map 110 at parcel S27, and after the fact permit for a shed and a deck.
Caleb, can we see who else is on the call electronically? Thank you.
We were here a couple weeks ago, and you folks had asked that the homeowner or representative be here. I think that was one of the reasons I asked for a continuance. And I see Ron Posh on the call now. So I'll turn the floor over to him.
Evening, thank you. From our first meeting, we had the concern of the shed and the patio, which I understand. I already apologized for not knowing that was necessary, given that I was just replacing what was already there. And we had agreed that I was going to move the shed, but needed to know if you guys were okay with where we needed to move it, which from my understanding, that was presented at the last meeting, and you were okay with that. I had just requested if, in exchange for keeping the patio where it was, that I would mitigate 5 to 6 times that area in the back to make up for that, as that patio was placed without any disturbing anything. It's just sitting on cinder blocks. No ground was disturbed. It was placed where the original structure was. And I was then hoping that all the extra mitigation would make up for that, as how one of the council people, if I recall, said he thought what I had done was better and better for the environment compared to what originally was there when I bought the house in 2007. So I was hoping that my mitigation proposal would offset that approximately 100 square foot area and be acceptable. As I had already stated, it's the only handicapped accessible area close to the water for my parents who live with me and my in-laws who are really close to requiring wheelchairs, and they're walkers now, but one of them is pretty close to requiring a wheelchair. And it's the only place that they can have access to, handicapped access, to be close to the water.
Okay, thank you. John, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
The only thing I'd just like to add, and we didn't, we kind of got stuck on the pond side of the house with the shed and patio, but there was a
an additional component to this proposal. It ties back into the second floor addition, which you have already approved, and we now have to go back to the Board of Health to address a condition that was put on this property when they rebuilt the home and put a new septic system in. And one of the conditions was no additional habitable space to the dwelling. So we have to go back to the Board of Health for a full review, and of course, they can't accept it or won't accept it from us until Board of Health, Conservation addresses it in a positive light. So I would like to talk about that at some point in time. It's separate. It was meant to be separate from the mitigation and the work or the proposed on the pond side of the building. But I did touch on it the first time I was here, but we kind of focused on another part of the property.
Amy, it's all yours.
Well, I mean, if I may, well, just to go off of that real quick, since we're on the topic, might as well.
Please.
Just to make it clear that the phosphorus removal component for the septic is not a mitigation for the shed or the deck or anything like that. It's a separate thing that pertains to the commission's approval of the second floor addition over the garage because of living space. So the Board of Health is going to require IA treatment of some sort, and this is something that the applicant is proposing to fit that need. My recommendation to the commission is that you let the Board of Health determine that that component, the phosphorus component, meets that requirement from the Board of Health. So if they don't feel that the phosphorus removal component, that either this type or just in general is what they consider appropriate, and they would prefer a nitrogen reduction system, which is a typical IA, I say we let them make that decision. Phosphorus, as we know, is what is most dangerous to the ponds. So, I mean, in theory, it sounds like a good idea, but in regards to what type of IA treatment is used exactly, I recommend we let the Board of Health figure that out and just agree that there's going to be IA treatment here. Going back to kind of the structural items at hand, I'm in agreement that moving the shed to where it's proposed to be moved and revegetating that area and removing some of the invasives that are encroaching is appropriate and a good idea. We did go back, and I did have a chance, Mr. Posh and I emailed back and forth a little bit after the meeting about the walkway that kind of extends from the lawn and eventually becomes the dock. And we do have evidence that walkway, that area in the middle, which doesn't show on the plan but easily could be put in, that has existed for quite some time. And Mr. Posh, I would once I make a couple of statements, I'm more than happy to turn it over to you for clarification because you are the owner of the property. The area where the deck is previously, according to what we have seen, either in photographs or Google Earth, it looked like just kind of an area with some ornamental shrubs, a mulched area previously, but kind of loosely vegetated or sparsely vegetated, mostly a mulched area with a few shrubs. It's really hard to tell about the existing wall, which is a wooden wall, whether or not, I mean, it looks fairly new, but whether it replaced a wall previously, that's something that Mr. Posh, feel free, and you can chime in now if you wish, and clarify that would be helpful.
That's been there since the beginning of, I think, when the lady owned the property. As you can see in that photograph that I emailed to you of my kids, if you look, obviously it's hard to look through the railing, but you'll see that there's a clear drop off where the sand and the mulch is. Mm-hmm. And that's where that wall is. That wall is original, has never moved. nothing. That is, like I said in the first meeting when you asked, I have not put that wall in. That wall was there.
Thank you for that clarification. That is just helpful to have right now. That being said, and you are suggesting or proposing mitigation to essentially, with the exception of the deck, to revegetate kind of all the area around it with a mix of shrubs, grasses, and native ground covers. I will say the commission in the past and myself have, if you came to us and proposed a structure, even in an area that was mulched and shrubbed, if you came and proposed a structure, which a deck is defined as a structure in our regulations, within the 0 to 50 foot, which is a no disturb zone, to a wetland resource area being the pond, your likelihood, even with some mitigation, it would be difficult to grant a variance from that. And the reason for that is the commission tries to the best extent possible, while still allowing access to the pond, to really prevent what we call that gradual creep and having, lots and lots more activity in our close sensitive resource areas. So we want to provide access, but also protect the resource. So unfortunately, I cannot recommend approval of the deck, and I would just recommend that area, that the deck be removed, the fire pit, or the structure in the middle, fireplace be removed, as well as the shade in that area just be returned to a Cape Cod seed mix lawn area, or otherwise dictated by the Conservation Commission for that area. And I do hear your request for a variance, and I do hear your rationale why. I don't want to get into the semantics of what makes something ADA compliant. I mean, I would agree that it's a flat area that makes it easier for people to go out and enjoy it, but it doesn't meet the definition of ADA to have to cross a lawn area to get to it. So, not picking on you, this is how we stay consistent with everybody else, but I cannot recommend approval of the deck. I'm sorry.
Even though it didn't disturb the ground?
It's a new structure. Our bylaw specifically prohibits it.
Oh, even if it's just sitting on top of things and the ground wasn't disturbed?
I'll let the commission address that. That's my read of the bylaw, but yes.
Okay.
I don't have a vote, I just advise.
No, I totally understand. It's just when I read the rule, it appeared if it wasn't like permanent or disturbing the ground, then it could be considered okay because I didn't disturb the existing soil or anything like that. But that was my interpretation, which could be wrong.
Okay,
That's all I've got.
thank you. Thank you. Mark, you want to kick this off?
I'm going to pass for the moment.
All right. That's for Stan?
No, I agree with Amy regarding the deck. In terms of any new structure within the 50-foot, we would not allow that, so. As far as the ground, I mean, just in my own, even though you haven't disturbed the ground, you're covering the ground, and it prevents anything from growing there or shading it and everything else, so I would be not willing to grant that variance for that deck.
Thanks, Stan. John?
Yeah, I agree with what Stan just said. I don't support granting a variance for that. I am very curious about the IA discussion, however, and I went and looked up the company that you mentioned last time, and I didn't find information that was clear or useful to me about what they actually do and can do. I mean, I think Amy's correct that we should more or less depend on the health department in determining, and I assume the health department isn't just
I'll make sure.
is not going to be is not going to be flippant or whack, I forget the word I'm looking for, but they're not going to be casual about granting approval for that. They're going to look into the details. However, these issues are very important to Conservation Commission as well, and I would very much like to understand whether this, what this technology really is, and the more technical information you could provide, I would be very happy, because clearly that one house isn't the only place where phosphorus is a problem. And I've never heard that there was actually a device that you could add to a septic system that would address the phosphorus. And of course, for any dwelling on Hinckley's or
Long
Pond.
but whatever, phosphorus and nitrogen are both issues, and they both work their way into the Herring River watershed, and but it's the phosphorus upstream that's a big problem. But it's still, nitrogen is a problem downstream. So I'd just like to understand a lot more about what that really does. And mostly, I thought, when I looked at, I forget the manufacturer's name, mostly they look like large mitigation for large-scale wastewater treatment plants. And the information about small-scale residential, I just didn't anything that I can understand. I don't want to take up time here. I'd just like some more information about that.
I can quickly just answer some questions. We have filed with the Board of Health and provided them a pilot permit from the DEP. This particular technology is brand new, was approved in April of 2021. There is not a unit in Massachusetts. This would be the first one. Health director and I met about it, and since given the inland nature of this property and phosphorus being more dominant in an inland region than nitrogen with coastal waters, we talked about using this phosphorus treatment, which is an upwell filter, where effluent comes out of the tank, drops to the bottom of the tank, and flows up through media, which helps bind with the phosphorus, and then it flows by gravity into the tank. The beauty of this treatment system is that it's all gravity. There's no working pumps, there's no floats, there's no dosing. Now, the problem is that it's the first one in the state, and one of the questions that the Board of Health will have, or at least the health director did have, is, what's the track record of it? And we don't have one. So what we did talk about was that we would like to do the phosphorus. It has, these nitrogen systems that are very popular started with one. And it was in Yarmouth that it occurred. It was a residential home in Yarmouth where it all started. So we have to start somewhere, but if the Board of Health is not inclined to use this property as the first one, we would be putting in some type of IA treatment for nitrogen, which is a much more widely used technology and is certainly ahead of the curve as opposed to phosphorus treatment, which is still, in its infancy.
So just one follow-up is, I understand it's the first one in the state, so there isn't a track record for deployed units, but I imagine the manufacturer has a bunch of information about how well it works. Even though it's not in deployed systems, they must have a way to quantify what it's doing and how they expect it to behave, and I'm just wondering.
Yeah,
Was
that
that in
information
the
has been
package?
given to the Board of Health, and I'd be glad to give Amy the packet so she can distribute it to you folks.
I'd certainly
I
like
think
to
just
see
out of, not just for this project, but in general, if I think it's very interesting. So electronically is fine, or I can just get it from Katie. It's not a problem, John. And I can give it to the commission electronically for your perusal and light reading.
Well,
She has the filing on PDF, so she can just give it to
Perfect.
you.
I'll talk to her tomorrow.
Great.
and I will peruse.
Light reading.
Anything else, sir?
Thank you, yes.
Okay. Brett?
No, I agree with Amy's analysis, and one quick question. What is the binding agent for phosphorus in this new technology?
I'd have to dig out the literature, I'm not sure.
Is it aluminum like it normally would be for, you know, an
Yeah.
alum treatment? It's interesting.
Some type of aluminum.
I think so, that's the impression I got from you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We'll get that to you.
Thanks for that summary.
Okay, I also agree with Amy's analysis, and I also agree with Stan's analysis with regard to structures on top of the ground.
Thank you. Alan, this is a continuation again. I mean, if you have questions, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, you can talk.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with all of the comments that have been made. Were this a new filing to construct this deck within the 50, there's no question that it would not be permitted to go forward. And I think as an after-fact filing, that our position shouldn't change necessarily for this. I don't see that mitigation is really a substitute, because our definition of the 0 to 50 is a no disturb zone at all. So I'm in agreement with everybody else that the deck is not permissible. So with that, can we have a motion?
I'm not sure of the motion.
I'll make a motion that that we approve the after-the-fact permit to move the shed closer to the house in the new location shown on the submission that we've received. It will still be within the 50 to 100, but closer to the house, and I believe there is mitigation that's been proposed to offset that. With respect to the deck, I propose that we reject the request to allow the deck to remain in its current location and require that it be removed.
Do you have a date for that removal?
Can you give me, anything you think is reasonable?
Maybe if I can, I'll remove that when the builder arrives to do the construction, because we're gonna have a fair amount of waste, because we have to remove existing deck on the current house, and he will take care of everything at once, moving the shed, removing the deck, and building the house.
When is that to occur?
As soon as I have a permit granted, we're starting.
Well, I need a date.
We would not be heard for the Board of Health until, I believe, September. And so there's an appeal period. So he'd be starting construction in October, November.
Okay.
So I think if you want to give him some grace period, by February 1st, deck removed, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's...
Too excessive?
I do think so, John.
So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, that you want to do everything at the same time, but unfortunately, that's, if it was a different situation and you didn't have construction already lined up, that wouldn't even play into it. We typically do a month. We could probably, maybe a little bit more, but those, structures at least should be, my recommendation is a month, and that's just to be consistent with others that we've required.
So it would be September 18th.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, just for sort of simplicity administratively, we want to make it October 1st.
It's up to you. 2 weeks isn't gonna.
It's a little bit over a month.
Yeah, I have no
Let
problem
me
with
see what date that falls on, because
Yeah, does it fall on a weekend?
it's a
maybe?
Friday.
Okay, a Friday.
And actually,
so-
September 18th is a Saturday, so that's
All right,
enough.
so let me amend my motion that the deck has to be removed by October 1st,
Yeah.
2021.
And the shed has to be removed then, too.
Yeah,
Moved by-
both of them will have to be taken care of by October 1st then, 2021.
The shed's easier to move because that's a different person who I can get on site to do that.
Good.
But there's no one to do the work for the deck until they're there. I mean, you know how hard it is to get anybody to work these days and show up for anything.
Yeah,
And-
Amy has said, it's regardless of whether you have this other project in the works or not, we would still set this deadline for you. So it'd be incumbent
Okay.
on you to find the people that can do this for you.
Is 2 months, does that make a difference? Or,
Well, yeah, but certainly not February. I mean, it's what
Yeah.
we.
My.
No, I think it can get, John, you think we can get the permit and start doing something in October? I mean, can Brian start, if the Board of Health says it's good to go, can we start disassembling the existing deck and, the demo part of it? Can we get that done in October? Because then we can do all the demo and get one dumpster and just get everything at once.
An unpermitted deck can happen tomorrow if you have the manpower.
Right.
Right.
He doesn't have the manpower, so.
Yeah.
Well, he hasn't looked for
I
it
heard
yet either.
Mr. Chase mention 2 months. Can we go to November 1st?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, just as a point of order, we're in the middle of making a motion, and there are multiple people chiming in here. Can we complete the motion, get it seconded, and then we can have some discussion?
I'm trying to complete the motion by establishing a date during which the removal will have to occur.
Let's
So-
get a date on the table, and then
So,
if they want to.
John, are you suggesting November 1st would be acceptable for you? Would be doable, I guess is more a better word for it.
It would be, yes, it would be more doable.
All right, so I'll amend the motion that the deck has to be removed and the shed moved by November 1st, 2021.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Further discussion?
Further discussion?
Just a point of discussion, you mentioned mitigation, but we should be more specific than that. Amy is suggesting 2-to-1, she says 2-to-1 mitigation, so let's just make that explicit.
Well, the mitigation is shown on the plan here, though, isn't it?
But there's more on the plan than what they'll have to do.
There's more on the plan than what they have to do?
Because the mitigation would include keeping the deck, so it's 2 times what the shed is for the mitigation is what would be required. And in my mind, reseeding the area where the deck was with a native mix. That would be my reason for doing an earlier deadline for removal, because if you're gonna do the mitigation plantings, you have to do them in the fall.
Well, let me start by withdrawing my motion, all right?
Or just have them do the mitigation in the spring, that's fine too with me. But,
So is the offer on the table here to move the shed and provide 2-to-1 mitigation for the shed to be relocated in an area within the 50 to 100-foot zone, and take off the table the mitigation that's being proposed to allow the deck to remain? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And where would the mitigation take place?
We have identified about 700 square feet of new planting,
Where
which
the deck
includes,
previously was?
well, where the shed is now.
The shed, rather, yes.
So we're not only removing the shed, but planting that area. There's also quite a bit of invasives around there. I think you have a document from Cape Organics, I believe, that address planting about 700 square feet here, which is way more than 2-to-1 for the shed. What we were also doing to offset the deck was to fortify on the eastern side, which is no longer applicable, and we would just plant where the deck is now, again, the native seed mix that Amy is talking about, and the rest of the area is native plants typically, and that's what's called for on the plan to reestablish that area.
Okay.
Mr. Chair? Sorry, and I'm not trying to make this any more complex than it is. I believe the owner said the shed could be moved quicker.
And
All
it
right,
just makes
well.
sense to tie everything
All
in
right,
together. I
okay,
would think.
just a comment.
Yeah. So let me try to make a motion again. So I move that we allow the shed to be moved within the 50 to 100-foot zone with appropriate mitigation to take place in the current location where the shed is. The deck has to be removed. There's no offsetting mitigation for the deck that's required. However, the location where the deck presently is would be reseeded with a native seed mix. And all of this work is to take place by November 1st, 2021.
I'll second that.
Can we, all in favor?
All right.
I'm sorry, John, you have a comment?
No, I have no further discussion. Thank you for clarifying.
Second.
All right.
Okay.
Seconded by
No, Mark seconded.
Mark,
I was-
yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you.
Thank you.
John,
Then-
thank you.
Then, John, regarding the septic and now going back to the Board of Health, do we have the conservation's blessing to now go to the Board of Health, and if they say that is an acceptable improvement, that we're okay, or do we have to come back for another meeting after the Board of Health says it's okay?
No, I believe we're all set with conservation. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Ron.
You're all set with conservation?
Yeah, you're all set with conservation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, John.
Right.
Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is a request to extend an order of conditions for 177 Forest Street. Steve, you've been very patient through all of this. Thank you.
Very instructive.
It's never
So this-
boring.
Replacement of old hardscape and the installation of new hardscape on the lot.
Yeah, I originally had no contract. I originally spoken to Clark Engineering about making those hardscape modifications to the site plan. He said it was really busy. He would get back in 4 months' time, which was beginning of July. He sent me a letter a few weeks after that saying that he wasn't able to do it, find someone else, and he would send them what he had so far. So right now, I'm in the process of looking who was available and that kind of thing for getting the site plan done for the hardscape, which is why I want to extend the date. I will not make the current one. I lost a good half year just waiting, and I didn't. You should have told me a lot sooner.
Do you have any comments, Amy?
Sure. So my recommendation this morning to Mr. Safran is, so this is an extension permit for his order of conditions, which was for the tear down and rebuild of a portion of the home. Mr. Safran's desire to do additional hardscaping had led to a discussion where the commission said he needed his certified site plan to show those amendments. However, because, we don't have that site plan, we're not, I think my recommendation is to focus on the original permit and see what time frame would be needed, and I think it would be very minimal to comply for the existing permit. So the existing permit does not have all the additional landscape amenities that Mr. Safran is wanting for the amendment. But, I think it would be fairly straightforward, in theory, to be able to finish kind of the original permit and then have Mr. Safran, you could either, my recommendation would be to extend for a very short period of time, to let him put in, there's a dry well or two, and to move the debris, and we talked about it on site today, to move the dirt piles and the debris outside the 100-foot buffer zone. So those are just really, those are the outstanding two items. There's a 244 square feet of plantings. Mr. Safran did do the roughly 1,000 square feet of plantings previously. But all of these things are kind of what I would say are low-hanging fruit. And then the commission, at that point, if you give Mr. Safran a month or two, or say 3, to do the dry well, move the debris, and then do the plantings this fall, the commission could then entertain either doing a certificate of compliance for that and closing that out, and Mr. Safran would apply with a new permit for the new hardscape whenever you do get that plan to do it. Or the if you had, 3 months' time, if you have said plan, the commission could consider keeping the permit open. But I think what you have left to do under this active permit is very, in the grand scheme of things, very small.
Very small, I agree.
So, my recommendation is the focus should be on that, is the site cleanup, and putting either, and it says dry wells. With that, I would, with the exception of the area where there's a, kind of between the house and the barn, where the elevation does drop off quite a bit, there I would say a dry well is more applicable because, rather than a French drain, basically a gravel trench around the drip line. I think everywhere else on that site, it's flat enough that a stone trench around the drip line of the home would be fine for roof runoff, except for where closest to the barn on the back side of the house. So you could put one dry well there. But I guess my recommendation is that you focus on that. 3 months' time.
Yep.
But I still want monthly kind of progress reports
Yes, I'll
from you
start
in
a monthly
those, even if it is, well, if in these next 3 months, hopefully it's not that, you don't have to wait for an engineer for the next 3 months
Right,
for
right.
this piece. So, but, going forward, when we say progress reports, even a quick email saying, monthly, Amy, sorry I didn't get to do anything, here's why,
Yep,
does
yep.
go a long way. That's my recommendation to you, is let's get something buttoned up. And then Steve can pursue Mr.
agree.
Safran can pursue the rest of the hardscape that he wishes to do in the future.
Okay,
Okay?
all right, thank you. Comments? Mark?
I agree with Amy.
Stan?
I don't agree. I'm just looking at the notes. We had I thought we had given Mr. Safran an extension of 6 months to do the few little things he had left to do, and it's still not done.
I think it was a little unclear
I
last
understand.
time about, we were I'm sorry, you can continue, I'm
Okay.
very sorry.
My understanding, you haven't been getting reports from him either as to any of the work being done.
But
It's
that
been-
was a discussion with Amy that I was gonna stop the monthly reports until there was actual work being done.
But I've been dealing with this property for the 4 years I've been with the commission, and it's the same story every time. Things aren't getting done. As we saw today on the property, under normal conditions, debris that should have been removed on a daily basis was just left on property under normal construction terms.
That debris is still being
Excuse
planned
me,
to
I'm
be
talking-
used back on the site.
Under
Anything
normal
that
condi-
was,
Under normal conditions and other projects, that wouldn't have been allowed to happen. So I'm not really in favor of extending anything at this point.
What would you suggest?
That's my comment right now.
John?
Yeah, so I more or less agree with you, Amy, except I have one question, which is, there's no topsoil on that property as far, or at least in none of the places we're talking about, so I'm,
It's piled, yeah.
what?
It was scraped and it's piled up.
it was scraped and there's a
So
big
is what
pile
we're
of it.
requiring also, when do you see putting topsoil back and seeding or whatever? I mean, the site should not be, the debris, I see clearing the debris is the first thing that has to be done, but once that's done, it's still sand. And there's, weeds growing there now that like sand, but there's gonna be runoff and erosion unless there's topsoil put down and there's something planted there to hold things together. I'm just wondering where does that fit in this picture?
It's not one of the conditions in the old order, Sharif.
What's that?
It's not one of the conditions in the old order.
So,
It's just, so as long as the site's not stable, it should have to have straw wattles and erosion control up, but
which it doesn't.
Which it does.
Where? I mean, there's a ton of
There's a-
debris all over that place.
it's kind of on the hillside. It's hard to see.
So, okay, so sounds like that was an oversight in the first place, and probably when those
But the site needs to
conditions
be
were written,
stabilized, yeah.
it wasn't considered that it was gonna be 6 years before anything was done.
And I'll be
So-
the first to admit it.
Well, but something has to be done to stabilize the site, in my view, so what is that exactly? Do you think it's sufficient to just leave erosion control in place and just wait until we get another proposal and engineering?
No, I
plan?
mean, technically, Steve, what should happen is that the site should be loamed and seeded with a native Cape Cod mix after the debris is gone. And
And is there sufficient loam on site to spread? And do you have any idea?
I don't know.
What was there before is what I kept.
Yeah, but I don't know what that means. So I'm not sure. I guess I would be in favor of this if part of the condition is loaming and seeding in a manner approved by the conservation administrator within the whatever term we decide. 3 months is what you were suggesting. I think that has to be done as well, because that place can't be just left to get
I would have to
washed.
contract that out, and I can't guarantee that there'd be someone to do it within the 3 months.
Well, we can't let the site go, so it's your problem to find a contractor. And you've got a very expensive project going on there, and you're trying to do it all yourself, and you're finding out what the hazards of that are. And I don't, we've been, I would say, incredibly forbearing of your delays. And I think what Stan is saying is, we're done with that now. You've got to figure out how to do this, and you've got to figure it out how to do it within a reasonable time frame, which is 3 months. And if you don't do that, what we're going to end up doing is start fining you on a daily basis. And in the end, you're going to end up paying more in fines than you would pay to get a contractor in there. I think that's a calculation you have to make. I don't know what else to do about this.
It's not the cost of the contractor, it's availability of a contractor. I am really having a hard time doing that.
You've had years, and it can't take years to get a contractor in there, so you've just got to step up and do it. I'm done. I'm sorry.
Brett?
Nothing further. I think I share Stan's frustration with this property, but we need a way out, and I think Amy's approach, might help us get there. So I guess I favor trying to find a way out.
Jim, any questions?
Amy, since this is an ongoing thing, am I allowed to?
It's an extension request. It's not a public hearing. Yes, you can.
So I can
Yep,
participate?
and it's been going, I
Okay,
think it started
I mean-
before most of the people have been on the board.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I haven't been on the board through the 5 or 6 years that this has been an issue. But just hearing the other commissioners on the board with their frustration, I really identify with that type of frustration, and very much agree with both Stan and John that this can't go on any longer. And I'm not sure that just extending the order of conditions is going to resolve the problem, because if it's gone on for 6 years, what's going to happen in 3 months that hasn't happened in 6 years?
Was there anything, there were conditions to reseed and everything else?
No, I mean, it's an expectation that the site is
I
to
can
be stabilized,
Yeah,
but
the site
it
is
says a
stabilized
limit of
right now.
work.
The site is stabilized right now. It's not in the order of conditions. So putting down and getting a contractor to put down additional loam or whatever, I don't think is in there, and I never thought of it as something I needed to get done within a certain time frame. Cleaning up, yeah, I mean, that needs to be cleaned up, but until my hardscape plan is accepted, I'm gonna use a bunch of that stuff that's there in the hardscape.
We don't, it specifically says in your order, no stockpiling of debris. And
I
we
don't-
wouldn't have let anybody else
I
stockpile
don't think that's
construction
debris
debris.
so much as stuff I'm gonna reuse.
Well, you have to move it out of the resource area.
Gotta move it out of the 100-foot.
100-foot.
Which would
We don't
probably mean
allow for
putting it up
stockpiling
behind
of
the
construction
far side of your
material.
driveway.
Yeah, it's on the other side of the property.
That's right.
And that's removing that part there. I've got to move it, not remove, but move it.
Essentially, I think the frustration is that, you know, nothing has happened. I mean, those piles have been there as stances since I started, and that was even shortly prior to you.
Yes,
Brad could probably go back to the beginning on this. You know, it's just unconscionable to me that we've persistently asked for this to be done and nothing happens. Put COVID aside, that's the current issue. But there was nothing like COVID that preceded that for the years and years that we have asked that area be cleaned up and that the resource area be restored. Nothing has happened. You know, and you say you're gonna reuse it, that's all fine, well and good, but I think our requests, persistent requests have been, get it out of the resource area. And it's just fallen on deaf ears, evidently. Well, two issues, before I even get to the next one. With respect to the French drains, this property is all gutters and downspouts right now. I'm not sure how you can put French drains on.
I don't know if it's all gutter.
It is not all gutters. The front of the house, the very front of the house is not guttered.
The new house?
Yes. Well, that's the old house, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's separate and apart. That's not even under discussion, right? We're talking about the new structure that's there.
We're talking about the new structure there, yeah.
That's all gutters.
Right.
So,
But the back of the barn was never gonna have any gutters either. It never did have it.
okay.
So there's.
It's a
I'd have
different
to-
filing.
The existing barn, the area that's
Yeah.
the opposite
the
side.
back.
Yes, the opposite
Yes,
side from the
everything
pond,
else.
or the
Right, I'm
pond
sorry.
side?
The pond side
Pond side, okay,
has no gutters, and the front of the old house
all right.
does not.
The rest of the structure, I don't see how we can allow French drains. I think you need
Okay,
dry
I
wells
was
in there.
I wasn't looking closely enough to see
Yeah.
what parts of the roof line had what. If they have gutters, it should go to dry wells.
Right.
It's the easiest way to do it.
With the exception of that one area that you say on the back of the barn. You want to put a French
Front of
drain
the
there,
house
that's.
and the back of the barn,
Well, and
yes.
the
Well, I
barn
don't-
is
we don't
was
care
a
about the front of the
separate
house.
previous filing. The barn has nothing to do with this.
Okay. So our requirement will be dry wells.
For dry wells.
So going back to where I was talking about, or heading earlier, I mean, it sounds like on the table, we have on the table a suggestion that we allow another 3 months for this work to get done. And I would condition that at the end of that 3 months, if it's not completed, and if we don't get regular reports during that 3-month period, as has been requested in the past, then we start imposing daily fines.
Mr. Chairman, when you say work being done, which work are you talking about that would need to be done within the 3 months?
The debris,
Just moving the debris?
moving the debris and the piles that are
Yeah, the
behind.
dry wells.
Okay. If that's all that needs to be done, then I think 3 months is too long. Seeing as that this has gone for that number of years, I would recommend that the time period be no more than 1 month.
Well, it's open for discussion.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that anyways, because right now he's got till September 23rd under the current
His
extension.
permit's active till
So
September
then you'd have
1 month.
3 months beyond that.
No, it's 3 months from today.
Today, okay. But then I just want to clarify now that the dry wells and the cleaning up debris would close out this order, and then the new one, that would be the remaining work that needs to be done under the existing permit?
The dry wells, the removal of the construction materials from the 100-foot buffer zone, and the removal of the piles of fill,
Right, so any additional work would be under what he would
a new
file?
permit.
New permit, okay, that's what I just want to clarify.
So we're not including loaming and seeding.
I think it's tough because it's not
One
on
of the
here.
concerns I have is that there's a lot of semantics involved here. What's debris, what's not debris, et cetera. And if we don't require the loaming and seeding, that I'm not confident that everything that needs to be removed is actually going to be removed. It's like, I would suggest we go with your proposal for those first two things and then add on loaming and seeding after that. Unless you're telling me, Amy, that because it's not in the order now,
Well, we need to prevent erosion,
we
be
do
that,
need to prevent erosion.
Right.
So what's, in the interest of actually getting it done?
Yep.
What is the simplest thing that can be done in order to prevent erosion?
erosion control, in terms of, I mean, you have some there, but I do think it needs to be beefed up a bit or fixed.
Mean some more hay bales?
Hay bales, straw wattle, I mean, something to keep the site stable. Either hay bales, straw wattles that are staked, or seed. We didn't have a condition in there, but we do have the authority to ensure that the site stays stable and does not erode. Sorry.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, now that I have the realization that the existing permit goes through September 23rd, which is more than a month from today, my suggestion would be that we just let the existing permit go to termination unless he is willing to do the loaming and seeding, in which case we would give him an extension, but the condition of the extension would be that he would do loaming and seeding.
Or some other form of erosion control?
I mean, I think I would leave that up to Amy as to what the proper way of going would be.
Mark?
I think the terminology that should be used would be site stabilization and not specifically loaming and seeding, because it might not necessarily be applicable in the given circumstance. And I think that might be left best to the discretion of the agent on site with Mr. Saffron. And select a date to be specific about with fines to start after that point. But to banter back and forth about loaming and seeding, to me it's very difficult to include that specific since the order of conditions has been issued a long time ago. Site stabilization is something else. That is part of it. So to review and make a suggestion on site of acceptability, to me, that's within the parameters of what would be expected.
Okay.
Under normal conditions, I would agree with what Mark is saying. I'm a little reluctant to leave it to Amy to deal with the uncertainty of how Mr. Saffron deals with requirements and the general history. I mean, maybe the way to deal with it is to say, at a minimum, whatever you continue. I mean, you probably know now, Amy, what should be done at a minimum. I suggest we word that into whatever the minimum is, just to make sure some minimal thing gets done without you having to negotiate further on site. That's, if you could suggest wording for exactly what that is, I think we should go with that.
Reinforcement of the current erosion control on the site, as well as addition of erosion control on the bottom of the slope, between where the new addition heads toward the barn. That's a more of a severe slope there. That could erode.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I guess the question, in my mind, what I'm thinking about is, okay, we said all we have to do is remove the debris, put in the dry wells, and the project's over. So now we're stabilizing the site somehow. For how long at that point now? What's gonna, because we're saying the project is finished then. and then a new project has to be submitted that will cover these things. So how long
For
will
the
that be?
hardscape.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the debris that's behind the structure, the piles of sand as an example, are, I'm going to call them new, from the perspective that, you know, those were part of the excavation from the basement, which were probably allowed under the original order of conditions, correct?
Yeah, putting in a
Well, we
cellar.
allowed the excavation, there was just not to be stockpiling.
Yeah, oh, right, yeah, no, I understand that.
But my concern is the long term, what happens? Because once this is done, what if he does not submit anything new?
I've got to submit something new for the hardscape.
He can't do any more work back.
I know. What if that was the answer? What if nothing gets,
Well, I mean, it would be on the onus of Mr. Saffron and us to monitor it, to make sure the site somehow stays stable.
That's the point for adding what.
And then-
Site stabilization, it's just something to make sure, you know, erosion doesn't, I don't think we can do any more than that right now. So,
Right.
I mean, I was just concerned that even that part wouldn't be part of what we're requiring right now.
Well, let me just try this on for a motion, shall I?
There we go.
Yeah.
I think you should.
All right, so I would move that we grant an extension until, let's see, what are we talking, November 1st? Is that correct? 3 months? 3-month extension?
From today.
September, October, November,
Roughly.
Yeah.
November 1st, for the installation of dry wells on the existing gutters around the house, a French drain to capture the roof runoff in locations where there are no gutters, removal of all debris and piles of sand within the resource area to outside of the resource area, and to the extent acceptable by the Conservation Administrator, stabilization of the site.
I'll second that.
All right, any comments, discussions?
I got one little one.
Go on, too.
I want to throw the word material in that band of items pertaining to what's floating around the yard. So that way it basically says, if it's in
Your
the
bricks,
backyard, it
everything,
goes.
your Construction materials.
That's fine, I'll
Yeah.
include that.
That's the
in
bricks and stuff that are done.
Yeah.
not just,
That
Things that
seems,
you-
that seems to be one of the
everything.
things that's in question. I understand you're referring to that as material that you're gonna reuse. I understand that totally.
Okay.
But there seems to be some question about where it's being stored. I'm looking for a resolution.
Yeah.
So sand piles, debris, and material, and other material.
And construction materials,
Yeah, construction material in general.
Yeah.
I think that covers everything.
yeah. And Ernie, just one clarification, you said in the resource area, but it should be buffer zone technically, because the resources.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted, for the record, make it clear.
Under discussion also, so when November 1st comes, there'll be no further extensions. That's implied, I think.
Once I get those done, right. No extension of what you just mentioned I need to do.
Right. So you'd have to refile it, and then we're discussing a fine structure. I'm not sure, we're not committing to a fine structure.
No, it's gonna get that.
Okay. Motion's on the table, it's been seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, one abstention.
You abstaining, or you voting?
Okay, motion carries, thank you.
I think so.
Thank you. Steve, I'll be in touch. I'm happy to come walk the site with you, and probably next week sometime, okay?
Yes, I'll be gone most of the week, but
I'll be in
the
touch with
beginning
you.
of the week, yeah.
Okay?
Good.
Thank you.
Amy, looking at what we have on the,
I
do you
know,
want
I know.
to do the certificates of compliance?
No, I think we may have, I'm wondering if Jay Barber is still on the computer. I'm not sure if he is, for 422 Main Street. Caleb, do we have anybody in the audience or no? Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's fair,
Or-
so then, yes, let's just go in order then. Because if they were there, I'd say we could take
All
them
right,
out of
because
order. But
some of
let's
these,
just,
some of these updates that we have, I think are important that we make sure we get to.
yeah, no, and
So we'll
I
just
think
keep
it's
slogging
gonna be
through
me
this.
giving you the updates, so.
Yeah, all right. All right, so the next item on the agenda is request for certificate of compliance for 11 Riverbend Road. Work never started on a proposed bulkhead. Amy?
Yep, work never started on a proposed bulkhead.
Just making sure that's what the issue was here.
Ernie, I'm going to step out for just a minute, be right back.
All right, thanks.
So I recommend a certificate of compliance for work not done. That's the easiest one we've had all night.
Okay. We need motions, right?
Yeah, any comments on these?
Yeah, I just have a question, because I'm new on the commission here. How can we say that they complied with the order of condition if they didn't do anything?
We're not saying they comply with the order, we're saying the work never happened. So it's called a certificate of compliance.
Okay.
That's just the name of the document, but on the document, it doesn't say, we don't check the box that says work has been done in compliance, we actually check a box that says work never commenced.
Okay, and that's a standardized document?
It's a standardized document, yep.
And which we would
We
never
cannot change,
till the
it's
end of time?
well, it's a state document, so we
Okay,
don't change.
Okay, then we just change.
But that's one of the options, is that work was never done, so
Okay.
it doesn't, essentially we're saying this, we're wiping the slate clean for this project.
Okay, thank you for
Yeah.
that explanation.
Amy, did you give us copies of those in the Dropbox?
I didn't, and I think,
Oh, okay.
I mean, if it was, maybe if there were ones that were questionable, if you want them going forward, we can. If there were ones that we even hesitated on, we definitely would have. But no, I'm sorry, we didn't.
Okay,
If
all
you
right.
feel like you want to hold off, it's fine, but
I'm fine with,
Melissa and I visited the sites and reviewed everything, and
yeah. Well, why don't we just move, since Brad is not here right now, we'll wait till he gets back, we take a vote on that. The
but
next,
do them all together, like if you can
That's what
discuss
I'm
them, all you
thinking.
can vote them all
Yep.
together.
Next one is 20 Brooks Road, map 5, parcel K1A5, raised dwelling 3 feet, added addition, upgrade of septic, and other changes to hardscape.
This was all floodplain. There was actually no wetland resource area, it's just floodplain. So the last thing they had to do was the planting, and the plantings have been done in accordance with my guidance. So I recommend cert for that. And then if you want, you can announce the last one.
Last one is Lot 3B, Doan Road, map 3, parcel E3-1. Construction of a house that's been developed and demolished and rebuilt.
Again, this is a permit that work was never done under. There was a new permit more recently issued, and it's now 15 Doan Road for the rebuild of a house. So this one, it's just sitting on the deed. So I recommend, again, no work, cert of compliance for no work done under this permit. So certs recommended for all three.
Okay, can we have a motion on these?
I move we approve the certificates of compliance for 11 River End Road, map 1, parcels G19, G110, G111, G112, G114, for 20 Brooks Road, map 5, parcel K1A5, and for Lot 3B Down Road, map 13, parcel E3-1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now, up for discussion and possible vote. So the bogs on 374 Main Street,
I talked with Leo today, the current lessee, Leo Kunis, and he is speaking with somebody from the tech tomorrow. I'm scheduling an update with Leo, between Leo and myself next week. But without having that conversation and without having somebody from the tech wouldn't have been able to be here tonight, I didn't think it was a wise use of anybody's time. So I proposed September 1st for them, and we'll kind of see where we're at next week after the discussion with the tech, but I think things are moving. He did want me to report that he has removed numerous cars and 6 trailers from the property. So, that's good. Well, we wanted them, to focus on doing a little
Small
cleanup,
dent.
and that's happening.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
pertaining to that? I know the selectmen extended the lease on
Yes.
that. What is the date for that?
November 2022.
Another year.
Yep, they extended it a year, and so now it's, I mean, we're trying to keep the ball rolling and have the discussion to talk about potentially if we want to lease it out for a longer extended period, but we need to know what the plan is first, so.
Are we waiting on, do we have a specific timeline for a yes or no from the tech school?
All I know is that the tech is going for their agricultural classification in October. So, and, I mean, some dialogue or some sort of a commitment and lesson or plan, like curriculum for the tech would be helpful and making our decision whether or not this, you know, it's something viable. So we don't have a specific timeline, but I can just tell you they're due to submit their Aggie application in October.
I just know from a standpoint of cranberry bog's existence, the longer we wait, the harder it is for the next person. And so I would expect a timetable from Cape Cod Tech to yes or no of if it's a viable idea or not, because they have to probably assess a curriculum and have multiple people on the school board vote on this. So.
So what Leo and I talked about briefly today too is that should it not work out with the tech, he needs to be able to, you know, articulate and come up with what plans would be for that site if he was to continue to lease it, or if we were to just, you know, continue the lease.
Yeah, you'd have to go back on.
Right, of course, that's what I meant, but yes, to continue to farm that agriculturally.
I just don't want to see it fall by the wayside.
Well, that's what we're trying to do.
Go into naturalization state and, whoops, Cape Cod Tech doesn't want to do it, and there's another bog off the record. So I'm going to be an advocate of keeping the cranberry bog going.
Yeah.
And I say that publicly.
Leo and I have been regularly speaking about updates on what's going on out there, so.
He's talking to UMass too, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I would just say that we give, if I may, we give timetables to folks that get permits and compliance issues and different things. I just listened for the last 3 hours. I think we should have a better timetable on this bog, on what we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
When we first started talking about this, I think even Leo was unsure of what, I mean, this is new to everybody, this proposal that he's coming up with, and I don't think anybody really had any idea of how long a lot of the approvals and everything would take. So we're sort of feeling our way through this. But I hear you. Yeah. I mean, it's, as we start to get closer to some sort of a plan, then I think timetables are probably.
I just want assurances that the bog will stay a cranberry bog.
All right.
So, I mean, it'll be regardless of if it's with the tech or if whoever it's going to be, at some point, the commission will need to make a decision to, in general, release this bog, this property, I should say, because it's not just a bog. This property is different in that there's numerous agricultural activities that have been permitted to take place there. So, regardless if it's the current lessee, what happens? Well, the commission will have to make a decision on this property and then it's coming forward. So.
All right.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda, removal of the unpermitted fence at 19 Wahwatese Road.
All right, I do not see the owner present, but if they are, feel free and chime in or call in. So I did share with you the email that I received in Dropbox, or the email that I received, I shared with you in Dropbox from Mr. Stevens. So real briefly, I'll kind of go through, I mean, I wrote a summary here. We do, so this is the commission required Mr. Stevens to remove a fence that was put within a couple feet of the resource area and in the 50, well, it just generally in the buffer zone, without a permit by July 1. Mr. Stevens at previous hearings had asked to be able to leave it in longer. The commission said no at a public meeting with Mr. Stevens present. He can then put a request in writing in to the commission, or stated that he could not, he also put a request in writing, but made a request or stated that he could not remove it by July 1 because of lack of people to come and do that. Stated he could have it done the next week, which is the week of the 7th. The seaward portion of the fencing was removed July 15th, or 16th rather. It was out by the 16th, I think it was. And that was the seaward most portion. The fencing on the property lines, which are the side property lines on the north and south, have remained. There was a little bit of back and forth. The commission, you know, based on what we saw, the fence hadn't been there previously, or at least for at least a period of time had not been there. So Mr. Stevens did provide via email some photos of when the real estate listing for the property when he purchased it, and some photos and other evidence. It does appear that on the south property line that there was a fence, but whether it was there several years ago. There may have been a period of time where there was a gap where there was no fence there around the time when the other his other project was taking place, which dealt a lot with revegetation in that area. From what was provided to me by Mr. Stevens and what I have found through my photos and other evidence, is that I cannot see that we ever permitted a fence on the north side. When we said removal of the fence, it was the fence in its entirety in the 50-foot, I mean, within jurisdiction, because none of that fence had been permitted and it was all brand new. So where are we now? So where we're at is that, you know, Mr. Stevens did not comply with the removal of the fence by July 1. That was put in without permit. Because there seems to be some conflicting evidence and ambiguity, my recommendation would be as follows: that you fine Mr. Stevens $300 per day for July 1st to 15th, so 15 days of fines, because that was that July 16th was when that seaward portion of the fence was taken out, and that you give Mr. Stevens a month to either provide more evidence that the fencing was there on the north and south property lines, or to have it to remove fencing on the north and south property lines within a month. If, you know, I'll share this with Mr. Stevens later this week, what we talked about, and if he can provide more concrete evidence, then he can come to our next meeting and present that, because that's still within that month time. Then if he can provide solid evidence that the fence was there, then the commission can rescind that month. And I'm not in agreement with statements that were made in Mr. Stevens' email that there are no adverse impact. The fence has and had an impact on wildlife movement and potentially other issues or other interests of the act. So Mr. Stevens was given notice of this meeting, so those are my recommendations.
Thank you. Do we have a discussion on this? Anybody have any comments? I'll start it off then. One thing I noticed in the information that was submitted in our package, Amy, there's a, it's called a previous plan of record that's dated 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Stevens, at the last hearing that we had, he claimed that the that he removed all of the fence that was not there previously when he purchased the house. So he left a section of fence along each of the north and south property lines that were perpendicular to the house, as opposed to the ones that were coming out from the front corners. He purchased the house in 2014.
Okay. Yeah,
This
thereabouts.
survey that's dated 2016 shows the section of fence coming out from the two front corners, but does not show any fence coming down the property lines.
Correct.
So
I noticed that
his
as well.
representation that that was there when he purchased the house, I can't see how that's supportable in any.
We don't have any evidence of that.
Well, I think the evidence is right here. This site plan is not showing that fence. It shows a section of the fence, but it doesn't show the
Yep.
fence that was on the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time he purchased that house, unless he took it down between 2014 and 2016 and then put it back up, it didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not convinced by his representation that that fence pre-existed his purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Based on his own, the documents that he submitted to us. And I'm in agreement with the fine that you've suggested, $300 a day from the 1st through the 15th. We instructed him to remove it. It seemed pretty clear that he would prefer not to have removed it prior to his celebration on the 4th, and evidently didn't happen until well after that, so. I'm in agreement with the fines, but anybody else have any other comments on this?
I agree. I agree with Amy.
I agree, and I'll just ask, I know we can't talk about the suit, but would these actions have any bearing on? No? Okay.
Separate issues.
Good, okay.
Now, there's one other question, or one other issue too, this contiguous wire fence that you've mentioned in your
Yep.
your summary. Again, his comment is that the fences, based on his letter, have no environmental impact, but he mentioned to us at the last meeting that we had that his concern was that coyotes come into the yard. He has a small dog, and he put the fence up to impede animals coming into his yard, so I'd say it does have an environmental impact to allow that contiguous wire fence that's also there to remain as well.
And my recommendation is to remove that as well in a month.
Can I
'Cause it-
clarify, we're talking the wire fence right on the bank?
Yeah, there was
No,
the
that's the
picket,
same
white
one.
picket
Right,
fence,
and the
and
one
then
right
there's
in front
this-
of it.
There's another wire
No, I
fence.
just want to clarify that's
I think that was there first. and
not
then he
something
put
else.
the-
Right,
the-
okay.
What he called his pool fence around it.
Right.
So, says discussion and possible vote. Or any other discussion on this?
I did run my recommendation by council, and they were in agreement that this was a good, like, giving a month to remove the remainder of the fence and/or, come back with solid proof was a good idea.
All right. So I'd make a motion that we advise Mr. Stevens that he has until,
Well, hold on, I think the month is actually a Saturday, so let's give a different date.
20th,
September 20th.
September 20th, to remove the existing fence on the north and south property lines of his house, as well as the wire fencing that is along the top of the bank behind the house. And that we impose a fine of $300 per day from July 1st until July 15th.
Okay.
You have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? One abstention.
I can give you the update on 422 Main Street. I mean, I think I have a fair idea of where it's going. And if he's not in compliance, we'll deal with it, but. So update on 422 Main Street. This was a property on Flax Pond that they had cleared a large swath up to and partially on the wetland itself along the pond without any permit. And the commission had required revegetation of this area. They had a revegetation plan. At the same time, the owner was speaking with a consultant about additional hardscape that they wanted to do, I suggested that they keep the two things separate and fix the violation first, and then, once that's fixed, go to the hardscape. So at any rate, it's been a little bit of time, but I did touch base with them, and I went out to the site and met with the owner the other day. The area is actually revegetated itself very nicely. There are a few spots that are fairly bare. So his revegetation plan that he had been approved with really is not applicable at this point. In the form that it's in, there's a lot of really good natives coming back. So my recommendation is that you allow me to work with him to replant these bare spots, and I counted they would need approximately 10 to 15 shrubs only of the same kind that are currently growing on the site, which is sweet pepper, arrowwood viburnum, bayberry, and the like. There is some mulch that was just spotty grass prior to all of this, and I told him he should scrape that out and just do a native seed mix. So this is, I mean, this was all in the 50. It was a pretty big one, but I do think in the end, nature did take its course, and they let it, and they did pay their initial fine back in the day. So I would recommend that you let them work with me and get these additional plantings taken care of this fall and just be done with this violation. And he is aware, and any future work would have to come in front of the commission and would require mitigation and all of that. So I think this one is actually fairly easy to finish up.
Okay.
So,
And we have
everybody okay with that, or do you have any other suggestions?
Do we need a motion?
No. It's a possible vote, unless, if you're all good with it, I'll just do it.
I think we're good.
Yeah. No, thanks.
Yeah,
Seeing that-
well,
seeing that
I mean, that's the telling. This is not our normal meeting, all this type of enforcement. We're just playing catch-up. 141 Riverside Drive, I haven't made headway with. This was a property that the new owner, contractor, representative was saying that they were cleaning up the site. This is on the Herring River. And it had been noticed that a little bit of work had been done on the dock, and the backyard area closest to the river and on the bank had been scraped with a machine. And so the commission had some enforcement actions there. They also had a revegetation plan that they have not, to my knowledge, been compliant with. We did send a certified letter out on August 5th to attend this meeting. We still haven't heard from them. It is evidently by our tracking, delivery was attempted. We sent it both to two parties, one, whoever is the listed legal owner, and also the person that we had been dealing with, and I don't know how they're related or what, but we also copied him on the agenda that we have on file as his email. We emailed him the agenda. We have not gotten any response. So my recommendation would be, since we've gotten no response, is to have him served.
What does that mean? What do you mean?
To physically have a police officer serve him with the enforcement order, which would be the first thing would be to attend the next meeting. Serve him with a letter.
Seems appropriate.
I mean, I think we've tried as much as we can, and, okay.
Have we threatened fines on this?
He has been fined in the past.
He has.
And he has paid, I believe. This was almost 2 years ago this started.
Yeah, I know.
So.
I mean, are additional fines in order if this?
Potentially, I
continues?
think first we gotta get him, see where are we at with this, what's,
Get him
what's
first.
been happening. Huh?
Gotta get him first.
Yeah.
Is the house done?
No, I don't think so. It's always contractors around there,
Taking a long time.
so.
Okay. So we don't need to do
No
anything
action
more.
on that one.
There's somebody living there though, right?
A lot of people there.
That's what I mean. Well, when I would over the weekend paddling,
Yeah.
there was somebody in that backyard, so.
We use whatever legal addresses they have on file for the town, and we can't get them that way, so. I mean, I'm happy to go with an officer to the property, but I'm not going by myself.
North Road, Amy?
Yep, North Road. So this was one where at the last meeting, there's, on 47 North Road, and there's 7 separate items in violation, and 2 across the street at 52, which is the same person in charge of those properties. Again, I'm not sure, they claim to be owners, but they're not listed as the owners of record. I don't know if it's a relation or somewhat. But Mr. Smith and I have been in contact since the last meeting. He apologizes that he said he forgot about the last meeting. The commission, he did receive the enforcement order and the fines electronically as well as on paper, so he acknowledged that. He apologizes, but he could not attend the meeting tonight. He said he had a family emergency. He asked when the next meeting was. I said September 1st, but reminded him that he has enforcement to fix said offenses by September 6th, I think it is, because that was the decision at the last meeting. So I said I would like to be in touch with him, tomorrow or the next day, and to get on the same page with him, and told him essentially he should start, making a good faith effort to coming into compliance, and that he would have the opportunity to speak with you on September 1st.
Okay.
To that extent, work has stopped on both properties. We posted signs, the signs are still there. And Melissa and I have been checking, not daily, but every other day or so, to make sure no other work's getting done, at least exteriorly.
Good.
Anticipated bylaw change presentation for the Board of Selectmen. I don't have a date for you yet. I do have it on decent authority that it's looking like it's not positive, but the selectmen will be discussing a special town meeting in October.
Oh, good.
We're not sure when exactly they're going to go back on regular schedule for the Board of Selectmen, but once I find out, I'll let you know. I'm targeting kind of probably mid-September for a presentation on the proposed bylaw changes.
Mid-September?
Mid-ish, I would think.
In prep for the town meeting then in October?
Yeah, because one of the issues last time was they said, we had done public presentations, but we hadn't made a presentation to the selectmen. So happy to do that. And I am pushing to get it on town meeting. So provided we have one, which is looking likely. So I'll let you know those dates, and it really would, I think, come off best if the chairman or a member or two of the committee would do the bulk of the presentation to show just, that you're obviously this is your project, that you are invested in this. I'll be there absolutely to assist, but
I'm available if you
I
want.
was going to ask, because you've been sort of central to this whole.
especially the water dependent
drafting and
structures
everything
one.
else.
Yeah, if you want me there, I'll be there.
Love it, yeah.
Would it be appropriate for anybody that oppose any of the regulations to present that information as well?
Help me with that. What are you thinking about, Mark?
The bylaw changes that were voted in, there were some that I was opposed to. And my question is, would it be permissible to explain that position to the selectmen as well? Because it was not a 100% vote, as I recall.
It's probably, you have the right to explain why, but maybe, I'm not sure if, I would have to ask if, whether as a member of the commission or as a private citizen, whether you would be, how you should speak.
Really, yeah.
I don't know.
If it's okay, but I don't think it's, the vote carried a certain way. And so that's the way the commission voted. It wouldn't be productive to the interest of the majority of the commission.
Can I get a copy of the draft? Or?
Yep, I'll get it to you.
Well, I was gonna ask.
Yes, you too.
The same thing.
Yep. I'll put them in Dropbox. I mean, you're using Dropbox now, you're good. You can use it. I'll put them in Dropbox just for everybody to have another look at things since we did it.
In addition, I mean, there's no reason that whole thing can't be debated on town meeting floor as well, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
It
Sure.
will be undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sure it'll be.
And I don't even know, Mark, is that appropriate? I don't even know. It seems like it would be odd to have the commission pitching a certain thing and then having one member trying to scuttle it.
I think you just have to say that
Well,
you're speaking as a
If
citizen
it
of the
didn't pass
town.
with a 100% vote, then, there's a reason behind it.
Right.
And, it's all public, so.
Sure. But
Well, we could certainly make that part of the presentation and ask them they could ask us if they wanted to find out why. And
As long as the door is open for, excuse me, for explanation, that would be fine.
if you want to give us some talking points, if they do ask why, I'd be more than happy to present them for you, too.
Okay?
Yeah, I don't know what the legal, I agree with you. I think the commission is presenting this bylaw changes, and it should be in a uniform fashion, but at the same time, where it's at the public town meeting or whatever, you absolutely have every right to speak as a public citizen.
So, if
That would be my opinion, I'm sorry. That's-
I mean, I think the way it could be presented is that, the bylaw changes were passed by the majority of the commission, but there was a minority opinion, and what that minority opinion was.
Anyway, if the selectmen are doing their jobs, they're gonna ask if it was unanimous. I mean, I can't imagine they're not
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
ask that question.
Yeah.
So, it's gonna be a conversation about it.
Right, and I'd like to be able to talk to your issues.
I mean, they could choose to not put it on the warrant, but could they choose to kick back parts of it? That's really our job, not their job.
What do you mean?
Well, say Mark makes an argument that there's a couple pieces he didn't like. Could they kick it back to us and ask us to change it?
So they could kick us back to us with their comments as to what they liked and what they didn't like. But then it's up to us as to how we proceed.
They don't necessarily have to support.
Right.
It just has to be, did we follow the legal procedure to get something on town meeting floor? It is the right of this board to put something on town meeting floor, provided you have done all the due process. If the selectmen don't agree with it, I mean, it's really up to town meeting. That's all the democracy's about. I think the reason it wasn't on town meeting floor in May was, partially, they were concerned about, there was concern about turnout and COVID and they wanted really with COVID, a smaller agenda, but also the complaint that I heard was more public outreach. So we're gonna try to do that. But those were the reasons given to us.
We don't have much time between now and.
Well, going to the Board of Selectmen, we've already had public meetings for the other people.
I was going to ask, you had a public hearing?
We've had many.
Public hearings?
Many public hearings for us, and they were advertised in the paper, and a couple people attended, different department heads, but we haven't presented to the board, so we'll do that.
Okay.
Minutes. Melissa has been working extremely hard, so I need to take some burden off her.
They were very detailed. No, really, they
Yeah.
were.
That's good.
You just want to go in order?
In the order that they're listed in
On the agenda? Yeah.
Well, we had the executive session minutes, you got to us before the last meeting, right? And we
Yes,
deferred
and
them. Why did we defer them?
Because we wanted.
To get comment from council,
Oh,
and they're all set with council.
I had no comments on those.
I don't have any comments either.
A motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes for the April 7th, 2021 executive session.
Second. All in
And I'll
favor?
abstain. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yep, 2 abstentions.
yeah, aye. In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mark, you okay?
I'm going to abstain because I think I missed that session, didn't I?
Let me see who was present.
You know,
You were there.
You weren't,
Was I?
You were there.
Mark Coleman, yeah.
Then I.
You know, these are tough.
I have you on the roll call.
Sometimes I don't.
Excellent minutes.
Just don't remember.
Okay. August 4th, any comments?
We're going to August 4th. I had a couple,
August 4th of 2021.
Yeah, I'm
Is
sorry.
you're going to, okay.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry, I'm just going in order in Dropbox, not necessarily
No,
by
you're good.
date.
okay, I had a couple of typos. One typo is they refer to Mr. Usowski somewhere lower down in the, that needs to be corrected, and there's one other that I.
Where's the well, we'll find it, Mr. Usowski.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a Mr.
let's see, this year.
We'll find it. Yeah, something else? Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually in the last paragraph before the minutes headline and in there.
Okay. Oh, I
It's
see the Mr.
Yeah, okay, so, there's one other thing that yeah, I guess I don't have anything else. Oh, no, I know what it is. On page, where are the page numbers here?
Oh, yeah, we should do that.
Page
numbers.
3, there's a reference to Mr. Schroed of Cape Organics, which is
Strode, yeah.
Strode.
Got it.
So that's my only.
Okay. That's easy enough.
I have a question for you. On page 3 for the Prince Charles, at the end of it, it says, Mr. Chase moved to issue 4 $300 fines for the unpermitted structures, including the shed, deck, walkway, and retaining wall. We just determined that the walkway was permitted, right? I mean, that it was grandfathered.
Yeah, so. All right,
It's the last sentence in
I
that.
see it.
Yeah. So,
That's the way the minutes should go, but we can have a response to that if we feel like we want to rescind the fine.
yeah.
yeah, we can do that.
So should we make a motion to
Rescind the fine
amend
for the walkway.
fine?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'd make a motion, we rescind the $300 fine for the walkway at 7 Prince Charles Drive.
Second.
Under discussion, also for the bulkhead,
Retaining wall,
retaining wall.
yes.
And it looks newer to me than
yeah.
suggested.
He said there was a
I know.
wall there
I
that
didn't
he
feel like making a
replaced in
big
the
deal of
same
that, but
footprint.
the wood looks pretty new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about that tonight, though, with him here.
Well, he said it was there.
He
when
said it was there.
But he pointed out a picture, and I looked at that picture, and I
can't
didn't
tell.
see what that picture.
Well, the drop off, yeah, you can't really, and it's such a low wall, I mean, it's like this.
Yeah.
But when was
It's-
the picture taken?
But
I
that
don't
wood is
get
not
that at
weathered.
all. I don't-
So, but I don't know, I mean, did he protest that fine? Did he?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, well,
I mean, we're getting a satisfactory outcome, so I don't mind rescinding those 2 fines.
Okay.
yeah. So I'll amend
I
my
mean, if
motion
he
to
doesn't
also include
comply
the...
with the timeline that we gave him, then it's different, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, then,
Also
I
include the...
second.
Yeah.
And I second the amendment.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Making money out of the town coffers.
So you'll make that change then, to,
I'll
or
make-
you leave this the way it
It'll come out
reads,
of
and
your
then you
pocket
put in a,
Yeah, I'm gonna leave this the way it reads.
okay,
I'm gonna follow up with a letter to Mr. Posh.
all right, and put it in the minutes for tonight's meeting,
Yep,
right?
it'll be in the minutes for tonight.
So are we ready for me to make a motion to accept the minutes for August 4th?
Sure.
2021?
Sure.
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
All righty, all opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain?
I'll abstain to all of them.
Thanks, Alan.
You'll catch up.
Don't worry, Alan, you'll be able,
All right,
very
let's
soon,
look
you'll
at
be
the
able to
ones
make all kinds of
for
motions.
August 5th, 2020. Any comments?
No,
Yeah, we're going back in time, sorry, folks.
None on those.
no comment.
Well, this is going way back in time, isn't it?
Yeah, I got
I
confused.
can't even remember that far back,
August 4th, August 5th. What year are we talking about?
honestly. We have Carolyn in here still. So, make a motion, we approve the minutes for August 5th, 2020.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 2 abstentions?
Just to let you know, we have an ad out, we've had an ad out for a while for a board secretary, an on-call secretary for numerous boards. When you have 4-hour meetings to try, mostly it's the assistant agent who does it. To fit that into our normal day to do minutes is like, that's why it takes so long. It's just impossible with
Oh, yeah.
everything, so.
Can't be
If
a
you know
favor-
anybody who wants to do, some board work on the side,
Is it remote, obviously?
you do it remote.
Can't be a favorite task either. Listening the minutes.
Well,
It's
no, and it
transcription.
just tends, there's always something more pressing that has to be addressed immediately, So, we're not trying to be behind, it's just.
But it can be remote.
We'd have to discuss that with, that would be administration's decision, but we're being filmed, I don't see a reason why not.
Okay.
But we'd have to discuss it
I know
with
a van
administration.
dweller that's out in Colorado right now, that used to do medical transcriptions.
Please, somebody.
Probably wouldn't
Somebody.
help. All right, let's look at December 2nd, 2020. Any comments?
No.
None.
No, we have a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
2 abstentions.
All right.
That's, any other business comments?
Medium agenda for next time, we have a couple discussion items that carried over, so. But it's good, we've made some movement on a couple things tonight, so good job.
Good.
Yeah. Nice job, Ernie. Good trial by fire
Does
there.
the paperwork stay
What
with
do you
you?
mean? The last two
You can
meetings
keep
were
it,
done
or
by
you can give it to
8:30
me
or
and I'll
something.
recycle it, whatever you
This
want
made
to do.
up
I
for
usually
that.
recommend if there are things that work,
I'm
that
sorry, I
if there was
continued.
something continued, you can
No,
take
actually,
it.
this is a,
But we also do put it in your Dropbox.
yeah, oh, wait a minute, we have to,
Yeah.
Big plans are always harder to
Are-
read.
are
in
we-
Dropbox
are we
than
done,
paper,
Ernie?
not so much. Oh, yeah, let's
Are we
adjourn.
Adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
aye. See, you can vote on that one.
We made it to that one.
We're
Wait a
still
minute,
on.
the camera's still.
We're still on.
We're still on.
I got some stuff for you to sign.
Now we're off.